if you can hear me, please let me know, because we're doing this usual thing where we always come in here and it always feels like it's a bit of a mystery game right at the start of if we're actually going to be live.
We haven't had a sound issue for about, I don't know, 50 episodes.
It's been good. You're right, but I don't trust anything.
No, that's fair, and I have had a sound issue at the beginning of one of my videos. That was about 4 months ago, and that one was enough to make me go, never ever again.
Yeah,
so,
it's like,
given that they can hear us, I do have something to say before we go. I know we're a little bitty late on this one, but happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Loremaster of Sotek, happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. So we are maintaining, of course, the Lorebeards tradition where we do birthday streams and then something happens between the first and the second one, just like we did for Andy's birthday. We do it for my birthday. It works out great. We're consistent here. We're consistent in our inconsistent. But today's stream is going to be really exciting. I hope y'all are looking forward to this one. This one's going to have I'm echoing a bit. That's interesting.
So I've just messed with some settings at this side, so hopefully if the echo's coming from my side, it won't be heard anymore.
Yeah, hopefully y'all won't hear it. I don't really hear anything, but
neither do I on my side.
So, okay, I'll just lean over here to make sure it's not on my side. But hopefully everyone is doing quite well. Today's going to be pretty interesting. As you all have obviously seen by the title, we are, of course, building a god, which is going to serve, I think, really, really nicely to have an interesting mix of allowing me and Andy to explore and explain a lot of the concepts when it comes to gods and answer a lot of the misconceptions, while also having some fun interaction with y'all, because we're going to be doing a whole bunch of votes in regards to I out what kind of god it is. Y'all are going to have a lot of power in this conversation, and I don't know where it's going to go, and it's going to be super fun. But I don't know how many people have messaged when they saw the title and they're like, oh, we're not doing build a chaos god. And it's like, well, technically that's not a real thing to an extent, which is one of the many things we'll be discussing today.
Yeah, I'm particularly looking forward to this one, not just because we're going to be discussing gods in Warhammer, but because I have done this a lot. And I do mean a lot. Because a long time ago, back when most of the people who watch us weren't born, there was a book release called The Realms of Chaos. This one here, in fact.
Yep,
indeed,
we're
the
both
one
on
we're both currently carrying, The Lost and the Damned. And in The Lost and the Damned, on page, we're probably talking around about here somewhere, where they have it marked underneath the words, the lesser powers of chaos, nascent powers and their demons, there is an entire section on, if we cross to the other side, creating independent demons. And you might go, okay, so demons and making new ones, that's pretty cool. Rules for that? Yeah, no, wasn't just rules for that. There was rules for the lot, including, right at the top, the patron, as in the god. And it provides a full set of rules for creating gods and all of the demons that might sit underneath that god, which is super, super fun. And I must have done this. I don't want to say how many times I have done this. I still remember the name of my very first creation when I was but a teen, because you know how your teenage memories sit with you forever. And Kelner Machnalach was the random named god that was, because there's entire tables for randomly determining the name of the god if you wish, the one that was created for the very first time with me. But I must have created dozens, probably more than dozens, of gods for this particular book that was released all the way back in, I'm going to guess about 89, 90, somewhere around about there. I can probably check if I just pop in here. It was 90, so 1990. So that was a full far too many years ago. And I enjoyed this entire rule set immensely, because it wasn't just what it did for the setting in terms of explaining how the lesser powers worked and how you could build your own ones. It was the creativity that came hand in hand with it. And I will say that part of this pretty much determined what would later on, when I started creating them for real, or Games Workshop. I have added to the pantheons of the Warhammer world, I would say at least 100 times. I was responsible for various books on the roleplay side that were dropping new gods all over the place, and some of these I have significantly detailed. So this is not a new process for myself. This is something that I have done a lot, both when I was a kid, then later on when I was a grown-up who was still, let's be honest, a kid, and then later on when I was more of a bearded grown-up writing for the game professionally when, let's be honest, I was still a kid. So here we are, so many years later on Sotek's birthday, heading back into what was one of my favourite pastimes of my youth, which is creating gods for Warhammer because it's fun.
Yeah, and should be a really good time. We're going to hop into it here in just a second. I do want to note, I'm aware that my green screen is being finicky. Unfortunately, I have to like get a step stool, like a little ladder up here to fix what's wrong with it. So just deal with it.
Just don't care like I don't.
Yeah.
You can see my office, whatever. This is where I work and do things. Indeed,
it's true. I'm not actually in
cards I'm currently prototyping over here at the moment for another game that I'm currently working on.
Oh my god, you're doing another game.
Oh, wait, I always do more games. Can't help myself.
Another LAWhammer stream game?
No, this isn't a LAWhammer one. This is a more professional game.
Oh, okay.
Which will be, much like Dark Deeds, a more professional game. And that's a good way to say, buy Dark Deeds.
Yes, do buy Dark Deeds.
Modifius.co.uk or Modifius.com has got it available right now. We're about to sell out of our first print run. So if you haven't picked up your copy, I would suggest picking it up now. And the reason I say that is because Modifius are in control of the print run, not us. And because it didn't sell out immediately, we might not get a second print run. That being the case, if you want a copy, go buy it now. You might not get another chance. Modifius.co.uk, Modifius.com, because if we don't get another print run, we'll be taking the IP back to ourselves, and Modifius won't have any more. It'll just be us. We might print again under a different guise. We might do something else with it. We'll find out later. But if you want a copy of Dark Deeds as it currently stands, now is the time to buy it.
There you go. And those links are in chats. Thank you, Hawk.
Thanks, Hawk.
All right, I'm going to grab the little super chat stuff that came in right at the beginning, and then we're going to hop into going through so many polls. So real quick, the people that renewed their Twitch subs, just want to thank y'all. Jantos, thank you very much for the 30 months. You can hear me? Great. Holy Artist, thank you for the 35 months. That's a long time. That is a long time on Twitch.
That's a long time.
Almost
as old as you are.
Yeah.
You wee baby!
Almost. A little bab. Long Lives 1997, thank you very much for the 24 months of Prime. Thank you very much. 2 years of great content. Thank you. Donoman, thank you for the 30 months. Hello, gents. I'm going to the German city of Wurzburg in a few weeks for a conference. Yesterday, I found out the castle in the area is called Marienburg Fortress. I doubt it's the one that inspired Warhammer, since there are several Marienburgs. It just means St. Mary's Castle/town, some of which are famous, but still. Well, be sure to have a good job and ask them why they seceded from the Empire. I'm sure they'll know what you're talking about. And then Shady Spinach, men hung out with an orc the other day. Pretty fun guy. Ha 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 ha. Thank you for those. Thank you, everyone, for renewing your subs. I really appreciate it. Inquisitor Thomas, proposed god name, Hammond Chaos God of Puns. We will. I don't know if we
appropriate.
I don't know if I want to unleash such evils in this space. Squirtle, thank you very much for the generous super chat. Happy
that was very nice.
Late birthday. So, Sotek, question that's been recently on my mind to ask: is it possible for a minor chaos god of realm to embody mostly positive aspects, or does the nature of chaos itself make that impossible? Yeah.
See, the
that's
important word here is chaos, and what does it mean?
Yeah. So I would say if you're using capital C chaos, I would say it's impossible. It's gonna be bad because it's. I think I don't remember what stream it was we talked about it, but the Chaos Gods Big C are entities that are so massive that no matter what they represent, they have become cancerous. They have become kind of, you can almost think of it like an all-consuming organism within the functioning systems that is reality itself, and they're just too big and they're fucking everything up around them. You can almost think of it like Nurgle, some could argue, is a life god. There are content or concepts in which you could view Nurgle as maybe he does have positive aspects, but he's life in such an unrelenting, overwhelming creation where it's all forms of life dialed up to the highest of 11s that it becomes cancerous and awful. And I think my favorite idea for this is, imagine if you had like a god of drinking water, which is universally a good thing. Drinking water is awesome. Chaos god of drinking water would be, it wants so many people to drink so much water that it's forcing people to drink water until they drown or they get water poisoning or their stomachs explode. Like, it's taking a concept and dialing up so much that anything that might have been good about it gets just completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, I'll take a slightly different angle because it's an amorphous term that's difficult to pin down. And the guidelines that I have had have also changed concerning how best to tackle this particular subject. But I think the easiest way to just simplify it and try to rub out all of the lack of certainty around it is, if we're talking Chaos God, capital C, we're talking about an entity that wants to destroy the world. It is at its heart corruptive, and everything that it does is at its heart about unbinding. It's about entropy. It is about destruction. And no matter how good you might believe a certain aspect of it is ultimately about unbinding the material realm and turning it into something very different. So that's chaos. And no matter how good you might be, if the god at its core is doing this through whatever malevolent manipulation that it has at hand, it cannot ever be positive. It is ultimately always destructive. It is always capital C chaos. No matter how good you might try and spin it as a mortal, it is going to destroy the world. The other gods, by comparison, are not. They are, broadly speaking, supportive of maintaining the status quo, where you have the mortal realms very much as a key, discrete, entirely separate entity that is not heading for destruction and are working against or neutral towards the chaos gods who are attempting to destroy it. So you could almost argue this is almost our first question. And that question is, are we going for an entity that is seeking to fall in behind the great four powers of chaos who are seeking to destroy the world? Or alternatively, are we building a god that does not seek to destroy the world? That's a pretty fundamental question. So this one here, is it possible for a minor chaos god or realm to embody positive aspects? No. Destructive only. And how that destruction manifests in whatever various forms of horror will very much be down to the different descriptions, the different ways of imagining it, but ultimately the nature of chaos itself, which is destruction, makes it impossible.
Yep, full agree there. Daniel 2 Electric Boogaloo, well, a god rather than a mere demon prince, but yes. Though you could argue that demon princes are gods, depending on how you look at it. Russ W, delayed birthday for our Sotek thing. The council's greatest mighty gift.
Just as a small aside, it's not just you could argue. The rulebook literally says they are. If you go back to the original one, it says the patron that you create can be a demon prince, because demon princes are, particularly when they are unique and not attached to one of the great four powers, gods. They are actually gods. They are elevated mortals who have become gods. Sigmar is a perfect example of this, although Sigmar is not a god of chaos. He is a god who very much wishes to seek to support the mortal realms. Sigmar is just basically a demon prince.
Yeah, basically. Yes.
I mean, it's a weird way of putting it, but if we're just looking at the core terms and what they mean, yes, he is. But the word demon suggests associated with chaos, which means in other respects he's a god prince, whatever, god king, whatever you want to call him. But effectively, he's the same, an ascended being.
Yep. The council's greatest mighty gift, Grimgelto. We summon you, bless Sotek with their presence. No, thank you. No, Skaven always get the best gifts, don't they? I bow to your magnanimous and truly considerate gift. I can't possibly accept it. Because it's too great and mighty for a simple little man such as me. So no. Captain Magma, playing Stellaris is a bandit empire. How about a god of thievery? We do have a couple of those kicking around the world.
There's a couple of god of I mean, Ronald at its base level.
But who knows? We might end up in a similar pocket depending on how people end up deciding to do things. Cinchmeister, does Warhammer Fantasy have a god of hangovers?
No, there's not one listed. I mean, there's lots of gods who I assume we're going to be largely associated with it. I'll just pick out one that's very obvious. Ulrich, they are great drinkers, the followers of Ulrich. But broadly speaking, no, not specifically called out as a god of hangovers.
Yeah. Also, I have started the first poll about whether y'all want to make a big C chaos god, which means that we have to, if you choose big C, then we're immediately constricting ourselves to we are dealing with a destructive entity that ultimately its goal is to bring down reality. If you choose to preserve the world instead, a non-chaos god, we are dealing with a god that might not necessarily be a good god, quote unquote, but it's not, you have a wider frontier. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Can manifest in many ways. And just to make sure that we have that clear, Big C Chaos God means ultimately aligned with the great powers in their desire to bring about the end of the world. The other gods do not wish to do this. And a good example of those, if you know your Warhammer lore, is take a look at the Elven gods. The Elven gods have got two very different parts of their entire pantheon. One part that are seen as, broadly speaking, the good part, the other part, the underworld part, broadly speaking, the ones who go against chaos in very dark and dark elf, relatively evil ways, if you wish to view such terms. But being a god with small c chaos rather than big C chaos in no way means that you are not dark, malevolent, or perhaps truly awful. So in the Warhammer world, evil is not very much associated with chaos alone. It's far broader than that. But if we're going with chaos, big C, you will definitely be building something that is, broadly speaking, bad.
Hammond, what is Dark Deeds and how do you play it?
We'll keep this super short. It's not about this stream. Dark Deeds is a game from Mark Gibbons and Andy Chambers, two old hands of the Warhammer brand back in the past. And they have created a game of malicious minions where you can, well, be a malicious minion working against your peers in an attempt to appease a nasty patron in the city. It is super fun with gorgeous art and a bajillion cards. We have 2 copies of it behind us right here. Well, actually not true. We have 1 copy and 1 pre-production copy on the other side. You might be able to tell if you actually look at either copy, one's bigger than the other. The one on this side... The one on this side is almost 10% bigger than the one on that side, because this is the pre-production copy, and the boards moved around on the inside of it as a pain in the neck, so we reduced the box size slightly so that it would work better. But yes, it's a good brilliant game.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it either for yourself or a local game shop or any of that stuff. And I don't get kickback on it, so my opinion is legitimately honest. I've played it several times. It's a really, really great game. I was even so miffed when a friend of mine accidentally lost one of the cards that I bought another set. Which I
actually recommend you all do this.
Yeah, get a set.
Buy a second copy.
Yeah, because the thing is that in a set, every single card is unique. There's no repeat cards. Like every single one is unique and gorgeous. So everything in it is incredible and awesome. I recommend picking it up. And who knows, maybe we'll talk more about it if we were to make a God of board games. Who could say?
Yeah.
Maglajoth, happy birthday, Sotek. Wishing you all the best, beating Biofoot to this, but Fishman God, let the Eldritch horror rise. I will stop now. I mean, we could end up with a Fishman God. We'll see where things take us. It is really, really gorgeous art, especially because you can use it as inspiration for a lot of other things. Hammond, Wurzburg, is that where Sterland is from? not that kind of worse. And yeah, probably. Hagen, literally pause Epic the Musical for this. I am ready. Epic the Musical is so good. It is so good. I'm glad I hope you're enjoying it. I love it. So many good animatics for that. Downman, potential poll question, you haven't thought of it. Is this god alive or dead? Possibly has it been eaten by Morgar the Shadow Game from the first stream? That's something we'll definitely have to talk about and consider. Hammond, too big and fucking everything around them. Sotek, yep. It is that is something I have indeed could be quoted as saying. Kripgoto, why make a god when you already know one? Wink, wink. No, get out. Dino Man, just thought Hatchet doesn't seem to really want to destroy the world as far as we know, but dominate it tyrannically. So Hatchet seems like not really a true chaos god. You could argue the same with the Horned Rat to a lesser extent.
The Horned Rat is expressly not a chaos god in the Warhammer setting. Now, regardless of what happens in other settings, in Warhammer, not chaos. Massively destructive, terribly awful in so many ways, but not a chaos god. Hashut is a chaos god. So Hashut, regardless of how he may be worshipped or how he may express, is ultimately interested in ending the world. It has very much sided along with the four great powers, and it's expressly written as he is chaos and they are chaos dwarfs. So, and there is a difference between Hashut here and on the other side the Horned Rat. The Horned Rat, who at this point most certainly is not a chaos god.
Yeah, the Horned Rat. It can be easy to look at the Horned Rat and go, well, obviously he wants to destroy the world, but it's no, he doesn't actually.
He wants to inherit it.
Now, what his inheritance from a human perspective looks like is the destruction of the world, but it's not the same. There are lines there. Also, Chad has decided not a chaos god, to preserve the world and pick a god that is a more natural element.
Like it.
So we'll get the next poll going here in just a minute. Captain Grimm, Realms is 2 years older than moi.
Hey,
know
Captain
my
Grimm.
identity? I had to. I quite like the notion of Warhammer Fantasy deities being aspects of larger etheric entities, a la Ashurin and Ulrich or Sigmar, were thus tied to one another somehow.
So you would not be the first to say, for example, try and tie Azurin and Ulrich together into one thing. There's an awful lot of similarities between the two, but there's also some significant difference between them. There's also gods in the Empire that look very much like they definitely are elven gods re-represented. For example, there's a god in Nordland called the Azure Man, as in blue, azure, the color, the Azure Man. And that sounds surprisingly like Azurin, and he's a god of the empty sky and phoenixes and the ilk. So you could very immediately say, oh, wait a minute, isn't that just Azurin? Cain is an even more obvious option, where you've got the elven deity, Kehela Menja Cain, or just Cain, and then you've got the human deity of murder, who is a six-armed freak with scorpions all over the place and nasty daggers, who is also called Cain. There's many crossovers here, and the setting doesn't answer that specifically and on purpose. It doesn't say they're the same god, it doesn't say they're not the same god, and you'll find that each version of Warhammer takes a slightly different tack. Some books say, oh, actually they're the same thing, and then another book will say, no, they're completely discrete entities. Another one will say there are no other gods, it's just the elven gods. It's a complicated affair. So you'll find that everybody's got their own preference, but Warhammer will probably, each time they do it, go in a slightly different direction. And it wouldn't surprise me if, say, the old world does a new one yet again, often because various writers haven't read all of the previous versions that came before, but that's just how it works.
Yep, very much. Adam Russo, I know God is ill-defined in Warhammer. What exactly do you think a non-chaos god actually is in the setting? Are they personified aspects? They can be. Yeah. Sometimes they're just spirits. So like a lot of like various terrain features like forests and rivers and large trees and mountains and hills all have gods, which are just spirits that reside there. They might just be a demon prince of another god, or a demon prince that rose up through some other method. They could be a lot. You could have weird shit like the spider god, who seems like an animal totemic entity that is really weird. There's a lot of bizarre different ways they can manifest.
Yeah, I agree with this completely. And to categorize these things, obviously we start saying it's one of these type of god, or one of that type of god, or one of these things. But the aether itself is deep, multifaceted, infinite, and weird. There is not just single entities living in there. Just like the real world is full of fascinating flora, fauna, life, and craziness in a variety of ways, the aether is the same. It's not just like 4 or 5 gods and that's it, or 20 or 30. There's thousands upon thousands of different entities, and anything that can be contacted by the material realm can be easily described by those who are ignorant or otherwise as gods, especially if they're powerful, especially if they have any interest in the material realm. Just take, for example, the original description inside the Realms of Chaos. I'm going to read this one out because I think it's a useful way of channeling some of your thoughts out there. The very first description for when you're creating a patron, it gives you 3 options for the Chaos God side. And even this shows just how varied it can be. The first option is a former champion of Chaos who has achieved demonhood or a demon prince. So your god was originally mortal and has ascended. Second option, a composite demonic entity founded upon one or more highly focused souls. Such souls are not dissolved in the warp but retain their own integrity as demons. So this is someone who is so passionate about one thing that when the soul drifts into the aether, it becomes its own etheric entity as other souls that are similar gather around it, and it creates an eddy in the warp. And these similar souls create an emotional purity that becomes a new minor deity. And so if a lot of people died in a particular horrific way in one area, all those souls as they pass on into the other side might create a horrific demonic entity of that particular area and dying in a particular way, such as the way that things can happen with the Warhammer world. And the last one is a demonic entity of some other kind is that loose, formed from the souls of life forms that are not recognized by man in general. For example, plants, rocks, planets, or from the souls of ancient and now extinct creatures. Or the demon is of an indigenous inhabitant of the warp and has no material origin and is simply become a chaos god. There are so many different things that can become chaos gods, and exactly the same is the case for all other gods too. The aether is a deep ecology in many respects, with thousands upon uncounted thousands of different types of entity. And many of these entities gather close to the material realm, to the mortal realms, and some of them hate it so much they want to destroy it.
Yep. Also, as a fun fact to show how difficult the term is to, I was literally sitting here through that whole speech trying to think about if there was anything I could add of like, this defines a god. And every single time I would go, no. No. I even was like, oh, it's if somebody worships it. But even that's not technically true, because there are gods that like fall into obscurity. Nobody's worshiping them. And then the god reemerges later and gets people to start worshiping it. So even that isn't a technical qualifier. Messy. Holy Artist, all gods are like the yin yang sigil. There's evil and good, and all evil has some good in it, if I recall correctly.
Yes, and if you're viewing the morality of things in such simple terms as in good and evil, then yes, Warhammer often falls back on a different morality seesaw where they go order and destruction, and that's a very common trope amongst many. If we go back to many of its sources, it would be law and chaos. That was the one that was presented, by example, by Michael Moorcock, was the sole chaos originating point, if you will, that Warhammer then took and used for itself. There is, I think, more complexity than this alone. I would suggest that a simple disc of good and evil in no way really reflects the Warhammer world, even though we have the elven gods following a very similar point, to the point that the yin-yang symbol is a core elven device. It is the symbol of Azurman himself, and you'll find it on a lot of the older artwork of the elves, where you'll see a yin-yang symbol, because they just copy-pasted it from Eastern mythology over into their elves in the original treatments from about the 4th edition up to about the 6th edition, much less common in later ones, because obviously they're pursuing potential of using it over in, say, Cathay, Nippon, whatever. But that sort of Eastern methodology is definitely applied to, say, the elves.
Rocker Boy Jukebox, with coordination to back entities tied to a military industrial complex like Militech for Cyberpunk or Atlas Corporation from Call of Duty, I assume? Probably. Yeah, if blood is being spilled as a result of the actions people are taking, there is some element of Khorne that will support what they're doing.
Is there violence involved? The answer is yes. Does that mean it can be corrupted by Khorne? The answer is yes. Does that mean that entire organization can then be used in a somewhat Werewolf the Apocalypse, for those of you that are World of Darkness fans, fashion, where the great corporations are effectively manifestations of the great big bad guy in that setting called the Worm? Absolutely. Can it be used to corrupt the world? Definitely. I think both of those are fine.
Go look
and
at
indeed, anything can ultimately be corrupted by any of the Chaos Gods, depending upon which route they take towards corrupting that group.
Yeah, I mean, Khorne by far has the most like sci-fi tech and fantasy of the Chaos Gods, with the skull cannons and juggernauts, which are mechanical flesh hybrid things. So yeah, I think he would be super down for all of that.
Thanks,
Charles CK, are Hachette the Maw or the Horned Red big Chaos Gods? Hachette is, the other two are not.
Correct. 100% correct. And make sure that we understand this. And it's really easy once you figure out the defining point of what makes them big C chaos, and that is they are ultimately there to destroy the world. They are the gods that, if you go to the elven myths, that rebelled. They are the gods that said, Azurin, fuck you and your plans, we're doing it a different way, and they tried to destroy the world completely. And that's what caused the original cataclysm, according to some myths. Other myths say the cataclysm was a natural result of the old ones' hubris, and it all fell apart because the old ones were not paying attention. The chaos gods were an external entity that was coming in. There's lots of different stories that say different things, but ultimately the core bit that we can keep super simple on is, are they looking to destroy the world? And the big chaos gods are.
What makes good gods turn to chaos? Can we blame the parents? That is hilarious and a little bit, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. You got to remember that the four great powers of chaos are part of some pantheons in the Warhammer world. In fact, they're part of almost all pantheons. It's just that most pantheons have them so prescribed, you just don't talk about them. But because of the core nature of the chaos gods, the word Nurgleth, for example, simply the core of Nurgle, is a core word in the Warhammer world. It means something. To say that word is to bring about that god's essential essence. So it's a word that is almost slipped through, because the winds of magic are everywhere, into every consciousness that exists, because every consciousness that exists can tap through into the warp unless they're somehow dead to the aether that lies beyond. So the chaos gods are there for almost everybody. Now, what makes the good gods turn to chaos? There's almost no easy way to answer this beyond story and myth. For example, the chaos god overwhelmed that god and made it turn bad and corrupted it, which could be one way of trying to describe how the great mass that is that chaos god in the warp, its eddies had reached out and swirled over another one and corrupted it entirely, turning a god from one thing to another. That would be one myth you could use, but there is as many ways that I could describe this as there are gods who potentially are now chaos gods. Broadly speaking, though, the vast majority of what we consider to be the lesser powers were originally probably mortal. And they elevated to becoming demon prince in some fashion, and through ascension, they have become chaos gods, continuing the work they did in life on the other side. And we have multiple examples of these across the lore. So most of them it's because of their stories, their individual stories, but many of the entities over in the realm of chaos in the aether have decided to flit from one side to another as well, and that's one of the reasons why you can just create any old patron you want using the old realms of chaos rules. It could be a great spirit of the wood that gets completely corrupted, perhaps by Morgor. That even could be it, because he effectively is a chaos god also. So there's lots of different routes that we can go down here. Morgor is someone we should definitely be adding on these lists, because he is a chaos god.
Yes. Rexy13, is there a god who embodies fear like Phobos and Deimos from Greek mythology and Warhammer? A god that purely embodies... Not that's off the top of my head?
No, I mean, there's lots of gods that use fear as a core component of their divine manifestations, particularly Cain. He uses it all over the place with the human magic, where he instills fear in his peeps. But broadly speaking, not off the top of my head either.
Yeah, there are gods that people are afraid of, but not. I wouldn't say that there's a god that I can think of off the top of my head that is just fear manifest. Yeah,
you tend to find that's the case with most Warhammer gods, though, because most Warhammer gods are far more personified, anthropomorphized, than often the Greek equivalents are, where they are given, they mean this one singular thing, where even then the myth did not necessarily show that. But the Warhammer gods are often given character, and through doing so, it weakens them from having a single aspect, and because of that, they get lots of things that they're associated with.
So before we go on to the next one, I think we should try and figure out our next poll real quick. So we know that we're doing a god that is not a chaos god. They are not associated with the chaos powers and might not be actively necessarily working against them, but are definitely not working alongside them. Now, there are a couple different ways we could approach this. We could try and figure out next where the god is, as far as like maybe giving a selection of continents to choose from, or like vague locations to kind of zero in, because once we kind of have more of a location, that gives us some ideas of the races and the terrain types and all that stuff that we're dealing with. I think that would probably be the next best approach. Unless Andy has a counter idea.
I don't. I'm quite happy to go with where your preferences lie here. This is, after all, your birthday god. So your preferences are significantly more important than mine. And at this very weak stage, where we're not really defining anything, most of my contributions will just be, meh, that'll do.
So, yeah, I'm going to make these 4 starting locations very broad. So we're going to do the New World, which is going to be all of Nagaroth and all of Lustria. So we've got the New World. We've got the Old World, which is going to be your Norska Empire, the Southern Realms, Talea, Estalia, the Badlands, the World's Edge Mountains, Bretonia, like all that crap. And we're also, I think, going to include, I would say, let's go ahead and include the Southlands in that as well. So we'll do the Old World, the New World, then we'll do the Far East, which the Far East will be Darklands, Grand Cathay, Nippon, Koresh, and Mountains of Morn, everything out that way. And then an option that would be, the last option will be our little crazy option, which will be the ocean, or the extreme, north and south. So southern and northern. We'll put Arctic and ocean. We'll put it that way. So this will be either the northern and southern chaos waste and the ocean. So those are going to be the 4 theaters that you'll have to pick.
The poles and the oceans.
The poles and the oceans. There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying if you pick ocean, there's no guarantee you're going to get a fishman god. I'm just saying, don't think that that's like an easy automatic win.
I've seen these polls before. I have a horrible guess where this may end up.
I mean, this could be your chance to get Andy and me to talk a lot about Ind and Koresh, which I know, or Nippon, which I know a lot of y'all have been really wanting from us. So this is your chance to try and force that conversation, or try and get me and Andy to talk about our thoughts about what we think maybe are the other native races in Nagaroth, like what's going on in Southern Nagaroth. This is y'all's chance to really force us to pick our brains about what's going on in some places of the world. And if you decide to blow your load on Fishman, I can't stop you, but... I feel like the power of the fish may be too powerful, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
All right, that poll's up. So with that, we can continue on here. And if you're like, oh man, I really want to talk about like Greek gods, well then the Old World would be really good, because we could talk more about like gods that exist around those kinds of locations. Because fun fact, the classical gods do not by any means encompass all the gods that you would find in Talea. In fact, we actually know quite a few gods that are not in Talea.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to do like a special hobgoblin god, yeah, then you want to pick the Far East for the Eastern Steppes. Far Salamanders, touch off topic, but why are the Chaos Gods trying to destroy the world?
Yeah, that's not off topic.
That's not off topic, and this is something we've actually discussed a bit. If you go check out the the Brass Citadel stream of depending on who you ask, we don't know.
Yeah, I think again, there are myths. There are legends, there are tales, but ultimately, the easiest answer for this, particularly when you're in the process of God creation, is because it is their nature to do so. Because it is what they are. They can no more attempt to keep the world in one piece than I, as a human, can choose not to breathe, can choose not to eat. It is my nature to do those things for my continued existence. And the Chaos Gods are, by their nature, by the way that they have been constructed, by the nature of what they are, destructive, mutating forces, and they are seeking to wipe out all of reality. Now, what's the myth attached to that? And is there counter myth for saying that perhaps they want something different? Perhaps there's a different version of reality that they're looking for. All of these things can be literally argued out until we become blue in the face and then pass out from an inability to talk anymore. This, however, at its simplest, is because they do.
Yeah, make sure y'all vote, because the vote is actually kind of interesting. So make sure y'all get your opinions in. Cole Patterson. Clearly, we need another ogre god. Having only 2, yeah, there's also the sun or whatever, feels wrong to me when one is greater than the other. So, I mean, hey, if you want that as an option, the Far East.
Indeed.
It could
Far
take us
East
over there.
for the ogres.
Hobbies, because I will say that I both agree and disagree at the same time, which I find fun. Because
I'm in the same place.
I could argue that both ways.
Yep.
Hobby Squire, how much knowledge does the people of the old world have about chaos? Like, I understand wizards and witch hunters tend to be fairly knowledgeable. What about everyone else? So very few people in the old world actually know that much. There's a lot of people that try and understand, but it's really difficult because by trying to understand it, you are, without a shadow of a doubt, exposing yourself to forms of corruption. It's literally like walking into a room where there's a very radioactive material and you have no idea what you're supposed to wear. So you just walk into the room and every second that you're in there is horribly dangerous. And that's what it's like to study chaos. There is no safe way to do it.
Yeah. How much knowledge do they have is a much debated point, but the easiest way to answer this simply is most are entirely ignorant. But that really glosses over something that I do think's also worth mentioning, and I hinted at earlier, and that's that everybody knows about chaos. Because it's in their souls, it's in their hearts. And they might not know any fact or any detail, but when they hear the word, when they get close to it, when that whispered sibilant sound is mentioned that speaks to the true nature of that deity, it fills your heart with dread. It fills your heart with fear. Tzeentch, as a term, isn't just the name of a god, which we in the real world can just happily throw out. Say, Tzeentch, you say that, you say the word Tzeentch, and that has reverberations in everybody's soul, because it is a manifestation, a divine word that speaks to everything that god is. In the Dark Tongue, it's literally that god's description. It's not just a name, it is defining exactly what it is, and through using it, everyone around will get the shudders, the fear. So whilst people have no idea about any of the details, they know it's wrong. It's one of those reasons why most chaos cults, if they use the actual names of gods amongst their cultists, most of their cultists would flee in terror, because it just fundamentally sits in your soul. And that's why most cultists use different names and they twist them around, they do other stuff, and then when eventually they've gone too far and the real words come out, their souls are already slipped beyond their grasp and they're caught up in this cult. They are now worshippers of a chaos god, whether they want to be or not. They are doomed, and their only chance of success is to continue and hope that the chaos god keeps them alive when the world eventually does blow up.
All right, so
Bummer.
Twitch chat tied on the Far East and the poles in the ocean, but YouTube chat went overwhelmingly to the Far East at 46%. So we're heading off to the Far East. Good job, y'all avoided the Fishman God. We would have talked about it, but I kind of want to do something a little more interesting, to be honest. Go watch our Fishman stream. I feel like we covered them pretty heavily.
Yeah, we did a lot on the Fishman stream. It was a good one.
Yeah, that being said, the other thing I'll add to this, Hoppy Squire, is the fun thing about this is there's also very wild extremes, because knowledge can come from a lot of really interesting sources of that. There are gods and entities that are whispering knowledge to their agents. Like Varinans might know a lot more than you might expect. So might a Sigmarite, or someone that has spoken with dwarfs or elves that have experienced chaos and written down a lot of things. But often what you'll find that's really fun is in universe, a lot of people speak in code, or they try and write things in ways to, it's like, imagine something, an entity is reading over your shoulder to see if you're learning about certain concepts, and the person that's writing to you knows that entity and thinks they know what that entity is looking for in the code, so they're trying to write a different code that the entity can't decipher, but you can. And it's really, really fun when you read about those kinds of notes in the lore about how people try and communicate information about chaos. It tends to rely very heavily on like allegory or coded messages and stuff, and it makes for a really, really fascinating amount of world building. Inquisitor Thomas, I like the idea of a horrific amalgamated soul god of shitposts, the terror we all experience groaning at Hammond's joke, leaving scars in reality.
Scar in reality. Let me also, while I'm here, say, hi, Sage.
Oh, hi, Sage.
Nice to see you out there.
Hey, Sage might be perfect for what where we're going.
Yeah, indeed. If you don't know, Sage is one of the players in LAWhammer, and she plays Nipponese. She plays someone from Nippon.
Go watch
Let's just
LAWhammer.
leave it at
Yeah,
that.
go watch
Watch
LAWhammer.
if you want to know more, but it goes pretty crazy.
JCAG, happy late birthday! My early super chat got lost. Oh no! Well, JCAG, I'll if you had like a particular message or question for it, I will be on the lookout in the YouTube
Down,
chat.
I'll look out for it too. One of us
Yes,
should catch
feel
it.
free to just drop it down there. Charles CK, are gods ontologically distinct from other etheric entities, or is it just a matter of which entities are acknowledged as gods by mortals? Yes.
So Charles CK, this question is a matter of debate, and that's not just with us debating out on the real world, it's also a matter of debate inside the Warhammer world, where they themselves do not have the answer to this. And because a lot of the expressions of this particular philosophical position is expressed in time. Hey, Maker Mike, thank you very much. Woohoo!
What a badass.
As I continue on,
Also, thanks, Sage.
I will, in fact, pour some Jack Daniels into that, because I had that old game where whenever anyone bought a copy, I added Jack Daniels to my glass. I got pretty drunk. But I'm doing that regardless. It was good times. So thanks for that. And I'll say that, to finish off on the etheric entities point here, all of the above ends up being the case, and the distinctions between them are sometimes prescriptive, they're sometimes descriptive, and different parts of the world take on very different arguments. So sadly, there is not a consistent answer to this one.
Yeah, also ontological is a perfect word for today's stream of yes. It's gonna get mind funky. Yeti, is there anything in the Warhammer world similar to the Lady of Pain, something beyond gods?
I don't know enough about the Lady of Pain to answer this with any authority. So I'm not quite sure is my answer to this one. But I will go do a bit of clattery keyboards to see if anything pops up. If anyone in the comments can drop in a super simple description, because I should know this. I have, after all, played...
It states she's not a deity. She is simply an entity that exists regardless of worship or anything of the sort, and is simply beyond. So she's like a fundamental aspect of the universe as opposed to a god.
The answer is yes. The Warhammer world is not reliant solely on worship. It is not. For all the descriptions, particularly in the old Realm of Chaos books, very much speak about the warp in a similar fashion to how 40k used it, because it was one warp for both settings. And the gods were very much created from the souls of mortals. Worship was not a core component of that. It was their souls themselves that mattered. The entities in the Aether in Warhammer are not that alone. Many of them are entirely independent to anything that happens in the material realm, completely independent. So because of that, we can happily say that yes, there's almost countless entities which are created beyond the sphere of mortals.
Yeah, and there's also notes within the like the old one lore that there were things within the ether when the old ones like first stumbled in there that were already by that point ancient beyond reckoning, that like were disturbed by the presence of the old ones messing around with things. There are things that might not even have showed up that we're just not aware of. And when Andy read the description earlier, kind of mentioned that there are things that are native to the ether and have nothing to do with the material universe.
Yeah.
There are completely distinct, bizarre, freakish entities that exist somewhere deep within, that someone could stumble into somehow at some point, which would probably not be a good time.
Yeah, and I think it's something that in general Warhammer hasn't tackled. It hasn't really described entities of the Aether with any description at all, largely because many of the writers have drunk in many respects the 40k Kool-Aid, and they think of the realm of chaos as the realm of the four great powers of chaos, and that's it. and then they forget all the other things that various books, including books from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which is the books that are meant to be their core source, speak of not just other entities, but independent entities, lesser gods, things that live over there and have never hit the material realm. There's all manner of craziness out there. So be aware of, as you're reading through sources, you might find some that say there aren't. They are, in the wider sense of things, probably wrong.
That being said, if you mean it in a different context, feel free to drop it down and we'll, tackle it. Magnetron 44, they're demigods, aka one parent is a deity. Yep, happens a lot. Some of the gods have shown up in the mortal plane and they like to fuck.
Yeah, they're not quite as Greek rapey as you get with, say, Greek myths, because they get really pretty rapey over with the Greek myths. Sexual assault is a core component of many of the deities' tales. Obviously, for sensitivity reasons, that almost certainly isn't the case for any Warhammer equivalents. But there are many tales of Warhammer gods that walk the material plane. The most obvious and easiest to pin down is Ulrich, the god of winter, war, and wolves in the Empire. A god who is a god of very much the northern part of not just the Empire, but anything up in the north. And Ulrich is known for being in the material plane and having a lot of kids. And the books, the Teutonic's Nest or Ulrich's Creed, also detail multiple tales of that god mixing up with mortals and constantly fucking up, making mistakes, having kids by mistake, doing things he shouldn't do, coming back and finding an error, which is why the Ulrichans don't look at Ulrich as a god that they should emulate. They look at Ulrich as a god they should learn from. And the core of the Ulrican Creed is you must stand on your own 2 feet. You must make and learn from your mistakes, which is why there's a lot of mistakes in the Ulrich Holy Books.
That's such a healthier method than Paragon worship.
Yeah, quite.
So, Hawk, you joke, but this could be argued. You could argue that Archaon is a demigod because his father is Be'lakor.
Yes, there's no argument. Archaon's a demigod. If we want to be very simple, and we're just being reductive with our terms, so trying to reduce them to the very smallest descriptive points, Archaon is the son of Be'lakor. Be'lakor is a god. Now, he's a god who got royally screwed and ended up being equivalent to about a demon prince, but demon princes are still in their own ways gods. So yes, Archaon is a demigod, and he's a demigod who eventually, through the course of his many successes, effectively becomes a complete god.
Yep. Captain Magma, inverse to Big C Chaos, a material god that wants to destroy the ether. That would be a fun idea to explore.
So that wouldn't be a god. That would be a mortal.
Oh yeah, possibly
that was really an immortal mortal, but that would be immortal. Until they become etheric, they're not by definition a god in the Warhammer world. And we have a clean example of that with Nagash. Nagash gains all the power of a god, but isn't actually, strictly speaking, kind of, until he is.
This is basically Nagash.
Yeah, this is Nagash. You're describing Nagash there.
Yep. Vaultboy 1300. Happy belated birthday, Sotek. Perhaps a human god of magic would be interesting. Something different than just Verena with magic. Well, seeing as we're heading off to the Far East, that could very well be the case, which I think it's actually a good time to do another poll. So we're going to do another location poll, and we're gonna narrow in a little bit more because it can give us some particular flavor. Just some ideas that I want to throw out just to be turning y'all's heads before I get the poll actually up. Something that we talked about back with the Cathay streams, if we decide to go to Grand Cathay, is the idea that Grand Cathay is not allowed to worship gods. The dragons have actively suppressed the worship of gods. But there are still gods in Cathay. There are still entities that we would recognize as gods. So that is something we could explore, of what would be the gods in Cathay that are trying to exist beneath the notice of the dragons, trying to survive in spite of them. We could go over to Nippon, which, thanks to Andy's work on LAWhammer, there are actually a lot of really interesting discussions we could have about what might be over there. This stream is purely theory crafting and having fun. We don't have to go somewhere that we know a lot about. I will probably I'm going to do an option that I'm going to call unknown lands, which will be in Koresh and Nippon. That way it kind of helps us sort our ideas.
Yeah.
We could go to the Dark Lands and talk about what might be the native gods of those lands. We know about Hashut, but there are other species that live there. There are other entities that would have been there long before Hashut popped his head out of the sand. that would still be kicking around and making a mess of things, and there would be some spooky ones. And so the big ones I'm going to give y'all are Unknown Lands, the Darklands, Grand Cathay, and then the Mountains of Morn. So if you want to talk about perhaps a third ogre god,
what's your option? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
So the Unknown Lands, which would be places that we don't know a lot about, Grand Cathay, the Mountains of Morn, and the Darklands.
And we're missing the steppe there.
I would count that as Unknown Lands, in my opinion.
You think so? I mean, it's pretty defined with the hobgoblins.
Yeah.
I think the steppe would be more naturally aligned with the Darklands. They're all the native greenskin areas.
So I'll put it this way for you. We only have 4 choices, and if they go Unknown Lands, I have 4 slots, which Eastern Steppes would be the 4th slot.
Okay, cool. Okay, so if you're looking for the Eastern Steppe, use your Unknown Lands option. So what's the core of how you would perceive the Darklands and its potential deities? Because the Unknown Land seems very clear, where the Darklands seems less clear.
Yeah, so for the Darklands, I would say think about the natural home of the Noblars, the ancient Famir down in the swamps and the jungles that fall along the southern coast. The original home of the halflings. We've got of the lands, the towns and places of pig barter. The Dragon Isles are right there. Yeah. You've got gods of the creatures of the Darklands, such as the Bale Tauruses and creatures of fire and terrible nastiness. There's a lot of really weird
stuff
things
in there. Yeah.
If you want to go a really monstrous option, gods of like the deep, rich earth. Of the boiling magma and oil and all these like things deep down. God of pig barter.
You've got enough there, I think. I think we've got a good idea of what we get from the Wolflands and the Badlands and all the rest of that horrible place.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about the Wolflands. Yeah,
the Wolflands and everything else. There's quite a lot around that area, and greenskins will be a core component of much of what we could discuss. And obviously, it's the original foundation point for many of the human tribes that pass through that area: halflings, Noblars, et al. There's all manner of cool stuff that we could up from there. Cathay seems to be pretty obvious because we've got multiple human tribes that would have been in that area that were eventually bound together underneath the rule of the dragons who heavily suppressed worship of any other any deity, not any other, any deity at all, and the worship of various gods of various stripes continued regardless, because there is always that other entity out there that can provide a far more immediate effect than a distant dragon who is doing nothing more than expecting you to toil towards the greater good of the Grand Cathay as a whole. So yeah, there's lots of cool stuff that we could drag from all of these, I think.
Yeah, especially because we do know the Dragon Emperor took a little while to like conquer all of the tribes, so there would have been gods he would have been crushing, quite literally. All right, I'm starting the poll right now, and then we'll keep going with super chats.
Like that.
So Jim Jones is the chaos god of,
I don't because don't know who Jim Jones is, but I presume I don't want to know, given that you said I'm expecting some sort of horror. So that being the case, I might move on swiftly.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Not a great guy. Not a great guy.
Not a great guy. Thanks, Hammond.
An actual cultist in our world. Not a great guy. Chapter Grim. On holy words, fortunate is a bit of a prayer.
It's a bit. Bringing up fortune.
Mm-hmm. Chapter Grim. I am not going to be able to read that without sounding like an idiot.
Audaces Fortuna Eovat, I guess.
As the Telosi would say.
This is really where I require Lindsay, because she studied Latin altogether far more than I did. My use of Latin is, Lindsay, I'm doing this, please. I want to make it classical or Imperial Gothic or whatever. Can you translate it, please? And remember, there should always be a Greek influence in there somewhere. Thanks. That's pretty much my experience with it.
Blow our load on Fishman. Is that how we get caviar? Yep, sure is.
Dear.
Yep, sure. Ricky Chapman, sorry for being late. Walked into a new hobby store. It was a blur for a few seconds, and then we walked out with over $200 in models. It's a dangerous place. They'll just mug you. They'll just take all your money.
Yeah, I have been both the owner of a hobby store and the manager of a games workshop, and yeah, I have indeed been that bit. And $200, that's not that much.
That's rookie numbers. It's rookie numbers.
Rookie numbers. And indeed, there's if you want to spend just a little bit less, go for Dardies instead. It's such a small amount of money by comparison, but
And you don't have
so
to
much
pay
joy
anything.
in game.
You don't have to build anything. It's just ready to go right out of the box.
And if you buy it right now, I'll have to drink more.
Which means our god options will get more unhinged. Magladrop. Would you say that each chaos god needs the world destroyed in a specific way, hence why they always collapse in infighting when they get close? I would say that you are trying to think of them as too human.
Yeah, I agree.
But
I would modify it with their followers are too human sometimes.
Yeah, their followers definitely.
Yeah. But broadly speaking, they don't want the same stuff, and they break into infighting because they disagree about everything. Just because you have a combined goal doesn't mean that you agree with each other. I'll give a clean example, and this is where I'm going to go very trepidatiously with my steps, but take a look at allies in real-world politics. There you go. I need say no more. I'm just going to back away from that and say, we know what the world is like, and allies often aren't. And in a similar fashion, the Chaos Gods are that, but add one super important word: destructive. They're all at heart destructive. They are corrupting forces, which means that no matter how much they have built together, they are destined to fall and collapse as they corrupt and disrupt each other.
Yeah, make sure to get your votes in, folks. Make sure to get your votes in. This is probably one of the most important votes of the stream, so make sure to get it in. Also, yes, I remember now. I don't know how I forgot for a second, but yeah, Jim Jones was the Kool-Aid cultist.
Of course, Kool-Aid. And I didn't say drinking the Kool-Aid. Did I?
Yeah.
I think I might have. I
Probably.
probably did, because it's a phrase I often use.
It's a very popular phrase, and that is where it got its unfortunate origins. Garg! Does Cathay deny or despise the gods? Yes. How do they comprehend chaos? So, the dragons despise many of the gods. The dragons deeply despise them and see them as very problematic, corruptive, ruinous things. And the dragons, that one of the things I really like about how Games Workshop has pitched them is they're taking it way too far. Like, undeniably, they take it to an extreme, which makes them very, very interesting entities. But as far as how they comprehend chaos, they see it as the great enemy.
Yeah.
Like the dragons, you have to remember, the dragons remember the world without it. Or at least before it got so big that it was the threat that it is now, before the portals opened. So for the dragons, they are, in a lot of ways, they are the most obsessed with preserving the material plane above everything else. But they're also trying to recapture that which has been lost, which we all know is futile in many ways. But granted, we don't know exactly what old Celestial Dragon Dad is up to, but he's up to something. But the dragons have a deep, deep, profound hatred for what they think of often as gods, because they change the material world.
And in many respects as well, there's one other major issue. The material realm is populated with entities that have free will. The gods do not. And now this might sound a bit surprising given what we know of the gods, but the gods are conceptual entities which go in one direction only. And that direction could be very positive, negative, up, down, whatever it might be, but they are incapable of being anything other than what they are. And that means, bluntly, their unchanging ways, which is for chaos in particular a rather amusing way to view it, given that they are chaos, small c as big C, they are fundamentally different, from example, from how Michael Moorcock presented the Chaos Gods, where they were pure change. They were mutated, they were broken, and they were ultimately entropy, moving one thing to the next state of being. And a realm that was lost to chaos was constantly churning from one thing into another, and a realm lost to law was static and unmoving. The gods in Warhammer are far closer to gods of law in that regard, in that they are fixed on one particular path. Khorne is pretty much focused in one direction and can never not be. And that is one of the reasons why Cathay hates them, because the dragons can change their mind. They did, indeed. They changed their mind right at the beginning. They saw the destruction that was wrought by the gods and everything that occurred because of the gods, these entities from outside coming in, and it was horrific. The world almost blew up. They lived through it, and they definitely turned their back on everything that was effectively an etheric entity. So, yeah, bad news, you gods.
Yep. There's actually, if you ever find a copy of the Liber Chaotica, there's actually a really good treatise or excerpt from Volkmar's diary or letter that he sent, where he talks a lot about his personal, and granted, it's an in-universe theological perspective, which makes it super fun, but Volkmar talks a lot about how he thinks Sigmar is a superior form of a god compared to the big chaos gods, because he views Sigmar, since he lived a life as a mortal and then became a god, he has the ability to change. Whereas he argues that the true etheric entities like the chaos gods, by their very nature, cannot change.
I think he's wrong.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think he's wrong too, but he makes an interesting argument.
But it's a really good argument, and it's an argument that I picked up as well in the Tome of Salvation, because I think it's a great one, and I think it's one that would definitely be believed by many, many humans. But the etheric entities are, by their very nature, a collection of souls that all think the same thing, that all work in the same way, which means they don't have free will anymore. They're etheric entities.
Yep. So the next poll is up because y'all chose to go with the unknown lands. So now we go to the part 3. Where are we going? Which is the final part, which is, are we going to go to the Eastern Steppes, the Isles of Nippon, the jungles and hinterlands of Koresh, or the very, very well-populated subcontinent of End?
Interesting.
So
Koresh, Nippon, or Hobgoblins.
Yep. So you have a lot of really interesting choices there. Pretty much all of them are going to require some pretty hefty theory crafting, but we'll work with what we get. Once again, this is a vote that really, really heavily matters. So Jeff says, Sage propagandize for us. You're not allowed to summon LAWhammer players to try and reinforce your opinions. That's against the rules.
There's so many interesting ways that this could be done, because the Hobgoblins as a whole have basically not been detailed. So that's super fun. Nippon has some very interesting Games Workshop aspects of its original theology. Koresh is a great big empty hole. And End is not that much fuller. Other than a few drop terms here or there, there's not that much for End either. So there's a lot that could potentially be picked up here.
Boss Apprentice, praise Malice / Malal, god of anarchy and hypocrisy. Poor old Malal. Just sitting in his corner with so many... It shocks me genuinely how many fans Malal Malice has, considering that he hasn't had anything written about him in such a long time.
Yeah, it always amuses me, particularly when you pick up, say, Anthony, who's done the artwork for the original demons of Malal, because you can find it out there somewhere. Someone even did miniatures of those particular demons from the original sketches. So that was the original artist who did all of the original, in fact, the original from wherever that book is. Here it is. The Realms of Chaos books. Okay, here.
Yeah.
So Tony Ackland, that's Anthony. Tony Ackland did all the art for all of the demons. He pictured them, figured out what they looked like. In fact, that's some of the Malali bits there. They're literally in there waiting to go, but they didn't get used because, they didn't get used for Malal because Malal was kind of, persona non grata for various legal reasons, meaning that whilst all the work has been done behind the scenes, it never really saw the light of day. So yeah, there's definitely something in that, but it's not what we're going to be doing today because you didn't choose that.
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of people, it's that phenomena of they want what they can't have. Since they can't have all they want him so badly. Mornington Crescent, plausible deniability is important when writing about chaos. Sigmarites will literally bring the hammer down. It's very true. There are spiritual and physical reasons that you should speak and write in code when talking about chaos. Lord Mouse Money, I have 5 players who recently got corruption. While I've got them all figured, one is a Bretonian traitor. What sort of penance would I say works for the Lady of the Lake? The enemy within, if it helps.
So I would check the write-ups for the Lady of the Lake inside Knights of the
Knights
Grail,
of the Grail,
for
yeah.
the second edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, but the concept of penances was kind of dropped in second edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It wasn't used very much. It was in the first edition, and it was reintroduced again in the fourth edition after I had a conversation with Graham, actually. So we got the idea of the penance back in. So the Lady of the Lake is, broadly speaking, just take a look at, in fact, I would suggest go judge her character by watching our Lady of the Lake stream, and then decide what the Lady of the Lake is in your version, because there's different ways it could manifest. And then having decided that, you could then make your own equivalent of a Grail quest, or helping the Grail Knight, the questing knight, pardon me, who's on a Grail quest, or helping protect somewhere in Bretonnia. But if you're the enemy within, you almost certainly be looking to do something that would probably help Bretonians outside of Bretonnia, because within Bretonnia, it's super easy. There's tons of stuff you can do, but outside, there's less direct impact.
Yeah, there is a handy little Grail Chapel in Uberstrike, if depending on where you are in the enemy within, that might prove of use. There's even some really cool adventure hooks for it if you pick up the starter set, Uberstrike starter set. There's so actually some really cool stuff you can do right there. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Also, make sure y'all vote if you hadn't, because the vote is neck and neck.
Ooh, how exciting!
The showdown is between the Eastern Steppes and the Pond. They are within 1%, and it's going back and forth. So if you haven't voted, you better go fucking vote. Lemon Cake. If gods are the collective passionate belief of its believers, could that belief be channeled into objects such as a Dreadquake water ammo being the collective hatred of slaves the Tsar exploited into their weapons? So,
you've made a fundamental error.
Yeah.
And that's that you believe it's their believers. It has nothing to do with their believers. Literally nothing. In fact, believers is not even really a word that's properly Warhammer appropriate, given that it's a pantheon that is in that world. Loads of gods. People don't just worship a single god. That's really, really rare. But those who think exactly like one of the gods, and their soul passionately holds that, when they move to the other side and die, the soul will move off in that direction. And there's lots of ways those souls can be enslaved, subjugated, and used by other gods as well. So it's not the only way to add. So in this case, a collective passionate belief. Okay, so let's say they all think like, rather than belief, because belief doesn't matter. The gods are real. There's no need for belief.
This is almost like a very orky or greenskin interpretation of things.
So let's repitch this slightly, Lemon Cake, and say instead someone who thinks and acts really like one of the gods. So a whole bunch of them who think and act like one of the gods. Could that belief be channeled? No, because they're not dead. It doesn't matter. Their belief and the immaterial powers that individual souls have can change the material realm, though. And that is, under a different disguise, the spark of magic. People who are capable of manipulating the mortal realm using their soul. That's the spark of magic. And lots of people have the spark and they don't realize they have it. And when they believe a certain thing has power, they can imbue it with that power, particularly over the course of generations. Because say, for example, let's just say the local lord has got a mighty magical sword. Okay, it's a crap sword. But everyone believes he's got a mighty magical sword. All of the people believe it, and over the course of generations, all that trickling small amount of magic gathers in that item, and after multiple generations, it can become an actual magical artifact that has become empowered by what you're calling belief, but it's not strictly speaking belief. It's their almost rewriting of reality, because they are, underneath it all, latent magic users. So latent magic users have a core aspect here, but carrying it on into objects such as Dreadquake mortar ammo, making it collective hatred of the slaves of Tsar exploited into the weapons. Not really. That's not really how it works.
Yeah, what I do want to say here is that using a god for that would not really work. But there are forms of magic that can do similar things, that can imbue hatred of particular things or take emotion and wield it as a weapon. Those powers do exist, but it's not related to gods.
It's not really a god thing, it's a mortal thing. And mortals in the Warhammer world are either trained or magic users or whatever and can do it on purpose, or they have it latently and they do it by mistake. And they don't realize they're doing it. But it's not really belief. That's not, well, it sort of is. It's their latent magic.
Yes. Oh my god, I think this is the closest vote I've literally ever seen.
It's super close. Ooh.
Yeah.
Let's leave it for an extra minute or two so that anyone else who's watching out there can go pop in.
I love the people in YouTube chat that are trying to get people to go to Twitch chat to try to manipulate the vote on the Twitch chat side. That's how you know it's close. Okay, I'm going to leave the YouTube chat just up a little bit longer. The Twitch chat is ended because it was running for 10 minutes, which is a long time. But I'm gonna let the YouTube chat just run a little longer as we go through this. That being said, let me take to the point that this is not horribly dissimilar to what the Demon Smiths quite literally do to Dreadquake ammo.
Yep,
is that it's very heavily magically infused with some nasty shit. Cameo. Are there any gods of redemption in a setting with so much corruption present? I like the idea of something opposed to chaos in a non-conventional way.
Yes, I mean, one of the core... there's lots of gods and goddesses in Warhammer that epitomize things that you might not expect. And a lot of them have got tales behind their creations or their myths or whatever that don't necessarily go in directions that you may immediately suspect, particularly from their descriptions. I'll give a single example of one here. The goddess Katya, who is a Reichland goddess, or a goddess at least of that particular area, of enchanting beauty, of disarming beauty, as it's often written as. At the core of that, her raison d'etre is to take those who are lost to the other gods and bring them back to a righteous path. A path that is, for example, not attached to one of the gods. And that is arguably redemption, but you get redemptions for Sigmarites, redemption for Ulricans, redemption for Chaos worshippers, and that will never settle well with, say, Sigmarites, who will always say there is no redemption, it's time for a bash on the head because you fell to the dark gods. So there's lots of stories of different deities that will have myth attached to this, but broadly speaking, if you are ever attached to chaos, you're lost, according to the vast majority of the gods out there.
All right, so over half of YouTube viewers has voted, so I think I will go ahead and end the poll.
Okay, what we got
right now. So on YouTube, good old the Eastern Steppes won by 3%.
That's close.
Yeah, but on Twitch, Nippon won by 5%.
How many votes in each?
However, there was not a very big difference in the ultimate numbers of voters between the Nippon and Koresh guys over on Twitch. I think it was literally only like 5 or 6 votes.
Okay.
Whereas in YouTube, the difference between Eastern Steppes and Nippon was only 3% of 33% to 30%. But from 153 people,
voters.
That's going to be more voters. So by literally just a couple hairs, much to my genuine surprise, we're going to the Eastern Steppes.
Eastern Steppe? Well, I didn't expect this.
I thought for sure we were going to like Nippon or Koresh.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we're going to get through a couple more super chats.
Just before we do, it does seem likely that this is where we're heading, doesn't it?
Yeah, that being said, I have a couple of ideas to potentially throw some interesting wrenches into things.
And I think that throwing a few wrenches over so that we can potentially broaden this is a good idea.
Wow, that man, look at so many hurt feelings in chat. So much rage and anger. Rig out the vote! Rig out!
It's his birthday. He's allowed to rig it in any direction he wants.
Dynaman, you say that if a god is material, it's not a god. What about the Great Maw?
The Great Maw is an immaterial entity with a material aspect. What effectively is the source of the Great Maw's, let's say, worship point, if you wish, if that's how you wish to view such things for the ogres, but it's an immaterial entity.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind its initial birth was through an etheric method of when that warpstone meteor hit the planet after the ogres had already kind of started worshiping it. It incinerated thousands upon thousands of ogres in an instant, and this thing happened.
Yeah, it was the birth of a god. And
Yeah.
the birth of the god over in the aether wasn't just all those ogres who were the source of it. It wasn't just the warpstone that broke reality where it hit. And it wasn't just the collective beliefs of everything that was around. It was a combination of all of those things together, wrapped up with a deity that almost certainly, or an entity would be better, that was almost certainly kind of there already and is now broken and effectively, as some outsiders may view it, chaotic. But chaotic, small c, not big C. It becomes a mutating, one could argue, deity of the ogres. And corruption is at its heart in a way that many would view it to be chaos, but it's definitely not a chaos god.
Yeah, very clearly hobgoblin treachery. Yeah, they're definitely. I'll also note that go watch the Great Moss stream for more information. But keep in mind, like when me and Andy go on there and we talk a lot about how the way the maw burrowed through the earth was not a straight line.
Yeah.
It's this weird etheric pathway that goes both through the physical realm and the etheric realm because
Absolutely.
it's in both very heavily, which makes it really fucking scary. That's one of the reasons the maw is so terrifying compared to many other gods. Captain Magma, there are cases where a soul greater demon, such as Scarbrand or Kairos, eclipses some of the godly etheric beings in terms of power.
So I think your biggest supporting point in this would be to just very carefully make a simple definition for each. One, God. This is a great individual etheric entity that espouses a single component of etheric energy. And sometimes that might be a single way of thinking. That might be something that is far less directly influenced by the material realm, something a little bit more abstract, but a single entity. And something like corn is something that's so big that it encapsulates many smaller eddies and the great vortice that is corn and all the souls that make up for it and everything else, that many of those souls, its greater demons, its demon princes, are larger than what other separate entities can ever achieve. So many greater demons or greater princes are significantly more powerful than what many would view to be full gods in their own right, which is one of the reasons why it gets a little bit confusing when we're discussing it. As Sotek and I said more than once, greater demons are effectively gods in their own right. They are a swirl with its own individual way of thinking within the greater realm that is that individual chaos power. And they are absolutely focused on being that one type of entity. And that might be enormous, by like eclipsing other gods in its size, perhaps multiple times. If you wish to use material ways of describing such things, they could be 5, 10, 50, a billion times bigger in the great infinite warp. So yes, some will be like that, but at the same point, it isn't discrete. It is always a part of the bigger whole, which means that in some respects, it has power is such a loose word.
Yeah, I was going to say, that also depends on how you define power.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What is the circumstances?
Power. What does it mean? There is a certain level of independence that they will never truly have, even if it's a god of independence that they are a part of. It's big and it's complicated, is the sadly simple way of putting it.
Yeah. Plus, it's like,
a good question, Captain Magma.
What is the contest they're having? Is it a feat of martial strength? Is it a feat of magical strength? Is it a feat of, like, there's a lot of different. There are some gods that would be useless in a battle, but could be exceedingly dangerous in other circumstances, even to demons. Korin Shima, sorry if I missed it, but are gods created by belief, or do they just exist and get worshipped by different cultures later on? Both.
Yeah, couldn't. All of the above. They're not really created by belief per se. They are created by the singular characterization of an individual soul upon death and moving off into the aether. And if there's lots who all are so singularly focused on one thing as it gathers in the aether, that swirl can create a unique etheric entity that, if it's big enough with enough mortals thinking like it, becoming a god. That's if we go with classic definitions from the original Realms of Chaos. But there are multiple other ways that gods can either be birthed or alternatively just be over on the other side in the aether. So it's complicated. There's lots of different routes towards individual deities potentially coming to pass.
Chapter Grimm, fortune favors the bold. Fortuna is Lady Luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Konichima, also, if Ashurin is the king of the elven gods, and you've been stressing elven gods are simply gods, how's his relationship with other pantheons? Does he lord over them? So this is something we've actually spoken about in prior streams on Lorebeards. I don't remember which one specifically. That there, I think it might have been the Kane stream or something like that. But there is a strong argument that could be made that Ashurin, the Emperor of the Heavens, did have a significant amount of authority or at least influence with all the gods, because depending on how you view what went down at the Cataclysm, there was a world where gods used to be far more present and easily present so, and then there was a world post-Cataclysm where that was no longer the case.
Yeah.
And
so this is a complicated one.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way of viewing it. We, as interpreters of the lore, can look at all the myths, all the stories, and we can come up with an objective rule. But I think that would be wrong. And the primary reason why is because Games Workshop writers don't know the answer to this. And they all have their own views. So when they write their myths, they often contradict. But in many respects, that works well for us interpreting it, because the in-world lore is always generally better than the objective god view. What we can say for certain is that Azurin, the god of phoenixes and ruling over as divine emperor of all heaven, at one point dies, almost certainly during the Cataclysm, and is rebirthed. And when he rebirths, brings the gods to heal, certain gods are banished never to touch the mortal realm ever again. That's mentioned here or there in drips and drabs. And whether that applies to all gods, some gods, or whatever you wish is entirely up to your own interpretation. The elves have clearly got a strong belief in one way, and until they rewrite that, which they almost certainly will as a new book comes out, as a different writer comes along and doesn't read all the previous ones, so they make their own new myths up. But as it stands, Azurin is the god of gods, and that's pretty impressive. He is the bifurcated mask, where all gods on one side and all gods on the other fall underneath his realm. In many respects, he is very much the manifestation of the entity that can control gods. He is as incapable of not controlling the gods as I am, as we said earlier, of not having to drink juice. It's just what he does. That is what it represents. So as this divine representation of all that is divine, he absolutely is that. But then there's going to be other gods that absolutely rebel against that aren't that. They don't get caught up by that. There's so many different types of etheric entity out there that just because this thing has divine control over absolutely everything doesn't mean that it universally applies, because the Warhammer's aether is super complicated. So the answer to this one, if we're going to answer it precisely, is also, if Azure is the king of the elven gods, yes. You be stressing elven gods are simply gods, yes. How is his relationship with the other pantheons? As far as he's concerned, they're all his. As far as the other pantheons are concerned, it's complicated. Does he lord over them? As far as he's concerned, yes.
Yeah, I think it's fine to leave it at that. By the way, thank you, Breakskid, for the 2 months. Happy birthday. Do plague zombies exist in fantasy? Yes. Yep. Plague zombies are not that super rare. They even show up in, I mean, technically it's an AU, but there are Zinch zombies that show up in the Empire in Ruins novel, which has to do with the, whatever that game is called, Warhammer Online storyline, but the general concept still applies. But yeah, Nurgle zombies, plague zombies are not that rare of a concept. He actually does that literally in the Tarmakon story. When Tarmakon takes the city of oh my gosh, when he takes the big place, Zambajin. There's a whole scene about Nurgle demons and insects and parasites worming their way into bodies and puppeting them as zombies. So yeah, it's not that big of a stretch. Listener Chris, sad we're not building the Chaos God of skill checks, saves, and combat rolls. It's just Nuffle. It's just another aspect of Nuffle, the god of assholes and bad dice rolls. Make not Ultraman a Warhammer god. Who specifically are you referring to with not Ultraman? Because I feel like that could refer to a couple of individuals.
Ultraman, I presume.
Yeah. Benjamin Fraser, Demon, mortals have free will. You've clearly never seen one hunger and pain, which is an argument a demon would definitely make against you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's also worth noting that in the real world, mortals have no free will. It's been pretty much scientifically proven that we are nothing more than biological machines with a sentience that sits on top of it that justifies all of our actions, which is horrendous. When you look into all the papers that have been released on it, and the desire at one point from various governments to not publish them because they thought that people would just collapse into horror, which of course didn't happen because nobody really believes it, but it's pretty much certain that we are biological machines that just fumble along, and our brains go, you did it for this reason. We go, okay, sure, that's why I did it.
Yeah, it's
hilarious.
It's one of those things where like you get put on your anti-anxiety drugs and you go, oh, I can think and I feel like my actual self and a person again, and realize that your brain was just totally fucking shit up, and that you, as far as you thought you were, ceased to exist for a while, and then you're back, but the version of you that's now back is not the same as the version that was before then. And you go, you know what? I'm just not going to think about it. I don't have the time.
Yeah, there is nothing worse than seeing a study where somebody gets to make a decision and then justify making the decision, and you see the bit that fires in the brain, which they don't control, making the decision, and then their consciousness firing, saying, this is why you made the decision. It's horrendous. It's absolutely awful. But propping on this one, in the Warhammer world, it seems to be the flip. And regardless of what biological machines may be wandering around like tiny little weird creatures on planet Earth, in the Warhammer world, they appear to have free will in a way that etheric entities simply don't, because they are so focused on being that one type of entity. Because that's basically what they're comprised of. If you are a god of fear, you're composed of fear. Everything about you is fear. You can't be not fear.
I would say that at the end of the day, the mortal creatures have complex needs, wants, and desires, whereas gods do not. They simply are.
Yeah, totally.
Hagen, perhaps a more mercenary god would be interesting. One that isn't part of a single pantheon, but rather floats around multiple. Nippon is a good start. Now, there are potentials with the Eastern Steppe gods that we're about that we'll actually do here just as I get after this for a second. Y'all may end up with a option as I throw wrenches where we might do a god that's not necessarily hobgoblin specific, but is simply a god of that area where it is worshipped by hobgoblins, but maybe it's also worshipped by humans and like chaos tribes, or maybe it's a god that wanders in a vague enough area, or its worship is passed around a wide enough area that you would encounter it in Grand Cathay or the Mountains of Morn or Nippon.
I would say I would replace the word worship with influence.
Yeah, influence. There you go.
Because often mortals who turn to a deity often don't do so as we understand worship. They do so because they're scared of it, or because they need its help, or because they want its influence. And it's worship of a very different kind to how it manifests in the real world, where often worship is demanded for one reason or another, often historic reasons. But I'd say worship's perhaps loose here.
Yeah, worship asterisk, because Warhammer worship is very different than our world worship.
Because the gods are real.
Yeah. So, all right. So for our next poll, what I'm thinking is we need to dial in a little bit on the, I guess what I would almost call the flavor or the context of our god. And getting it down to 4 choices. So there are some broad categories we could try and break down to move a little closer. The first one would be that it could just be a hobgoblin god, which would allow it to have some very specific theming that revolves very much around hobgoblin culture, the things they encounter, things of that nature, and would be interesting because that could take us in a direction of thinking about things like the Bad Moon or the Spider God, Gork and Mork, stuff like that. So we'll have hobgoblin god as our first option. A second option that I think would be interesting is what I guess I would refer to as more of an elemental force. So dealing with the god of the Eastern Steppes that maybe is the wind, which the Eastern Steppes are known for being these great windswept plains that have extreme winds and all of this, a very open space that has, there's notes about how there are incarnate elementals of light that are up there that appear almost as zephyrs and are seen as like wind elementals by the hobgoblins, things of that nature. So we could have, or people might worship the sun in a certain fashion. There could be a sun god up there because of how the sun is just blaring down on that part of the world. So you kind of have this elemental, more force of nature type deity that could be represented in a lot of different ways. And those would be gods that would have a lot of influence far beyond outside of just the Eastern Steppes in that area as well. They would have presence very strongly in places like Nippon and Cathay and etc. Whereas the Hobgoblin god wouldn't necessarily. I think a third option might be a god of I almost want to say like a particular I almost want to say a god of like a particular aspect, but I'm trying to find the way to phrase it right. Maybe concept would be a better word.
What are you thinking on?
I'm almost thinking like a god that represents more of the survival element of what it is to be in the Eastern Steppes, of how everyone has to be nomadic, constantly on the move. That could kind of fall under that wind god concept, in a way.
So your first one is hobgoblins. Your second one is elemental deity. Your third one would then be what? Something a little bit more
maybe
abstract.
like a totemic animals god.
Totemic, possibly.
Yeah, totemic god.
More animist. Yeah, that could work. Yeah. And then maybe given where we are talking of here, which is the Northern Steppe and its close proximity to the realm of chaos, effectively just sitting off to the north with the Great Chaos Gate, you could pick up a fourth type, which would be directly tied with somehow anti-chaos. Now, exactly how that manifests could be a host of different
Could
ways.
be like an elevated, maybe an elevated mortal.
Could be
someone that like fought against chaos and was elevated up.
The exact detail of what it is would come after.
Yeah,
it's more the someone who's a deity that's used and influences the area that's particularly anti-chaotic. So that would give you something that's hobgoblin, something that's elemental, something that's animist, or perhaps totemic. Okay, and then finally something that's anti-chaos. I think that gives us, a relatively decent mix, unless anyone's got some other ideas in there. There's enough in there that we can then home in on exactly what the deity's for.
Yeah. I dig that. So, and I'm going to be looking at chat for just a minute for people suggesting ideas in case there's something else that jumps out at me as like could be another.
Just bring up Dynamite as well. It won't be minor chaos because we've already discarded chaos as an idea earlier in the stream.
Yes, we have already banished chaos as a potential option. And elemental. So just to go over these all, just as a brief refresher before the vote goes up, I'm going to keep my eyes out.
Dynamite already corrected.
He's already ahead of you. So keep in mind that so a hobgoblin god is going to be a god that's very centric around concepts of the hobgoblins, which could appear in a lot of different ways. But we're going to be turning to hobgoblin culture, living, all that stuff to figure out what that god is, and that's going to narrow our focus a lot. An elemental spirit would be a spirit potentially of the land, so it could be like a spirit of particular geographical features.
Yep.
It could be a spirit of air, sky, nature.
It could be almost anything. Yeah,
a lot of those things. A totemic animal spirit would obviously be a spirit that is embodied by the species that live in the Eastern Steppe. So we'd be looking for our wolves. We'd be looking at certain kinds of like bison and creatures that live on the great sweeping plains of the Eastern Steppes, and a lot of the like entity or creatures that are native to those regions and the way people observe them and how they tie into their way of life and how that would reflect on into a god. And then anti-chaos, which would be a god who's has a purpose that is purely built and designed around facing off with and holding back chaos, which could take a crazy amount of different forms. So I think that's a pretty good. List.
Yeah, so buddy.
So I'm going to go ahead and fire off that poll. That poll has started, and now we can get back into super chats. Praise Zuvacin, Chaos God of Chaos. Good old Zuvacin, who is very confusing to people that encounter him.
And the pair of those from the old Something Rotten in Kislev book are pretty much never used again anywhere else, sadly.
They're a bit of a messy bunch. Charles C.K., are Gorka Morka abnormal as etheric entities? Not really, but kinda. No. But not really.
They could be. is a better answer, I think.
There you
in
go.
that they very easily fit within the standard cosmology that has already been created in, say, the original Realm of Chaos books and sort of copy pasted into a lot of later books. They can easily fit into that without any problems at all. But it would be equally possible for us to say they are something a bit different, they manifest a bit differently, and we could go down a more 40k route and messing around with it in that regard. That would completely match the background that the Orcs, Goblins, et al. Have been given in more than one place. But there is no need for them to be abnormal, but they definitely could be written that way if you wish to.
Yeah, it kind of falls under that whole thing of like some writers treat greenskins as just a regular race that has access to regular magic, and some say no, they have these very unique, fascinating psychic powers that have a reaction with the winds of magic, but are very, very distinct, which are two very different ideas that have a lot of similarities, and writers often will pick a side, and you never know what side they're going to pick until you read it.
I mean, loosely speaking, it's our 40k orcs represented by Warhammer orcs with K or C. And is there significant difference? Now, the answer is there are massive differences between the pair, but that doesn't mean that the deities that lie behind them and the way that Wa energy forms, collects, and can be utilized by shamans is different. So, yeah. Do they take the 40k model for how Wa energy works, or do they instead take the Winds of Magic model and apply that to it instead? You'll find the Age of Sigmar kind of flubs the both, slaps it together and goes, yeah, grr, that'll do. And it's some weak-ass thinking in terms of how it had been presented previously, but it'll certainly give you one answer to it. So if we go with that answer, then the answer is they're not abnormal. They absolutely fit within the cosmology of the Warhammer world and the Aether as it currently stands.
Bow to blessed con opener of the mighty Hobgob. That's deploy the can opener. Great foe of armor. Yeah. Ricky Tevin, we're gonna make a chair out of your back plates for this treachery, Groby. Donovan, okay, suggestion for the steps. The Howl of Night. A mighty wolf who the hobgoblins believe stalks the very night itself as it moves across the sky. Is this great power of the hunt, but more of a natural sense of how actually predators hunt, tracking prey across the steppes and using cunning, stealth, ferocity, and violence to achieve your ends. Yeah, that's not a bad proposal at all. If we end up in the hobgoblin thing, there will definitely be a wolf option if we end up in the hobgoblin ballpark. Do be sure to get your votes in, by the way, folks. Pretty close. This one's very. This one's actually quite interesting. It's spread over all four options.
Yeah, I think all four of them were quite interesting. So I can see why different people will go for different choices there. There's quite a lot of fun that could come out of this one.
Yeah, I will say, if you haven't voted, make sure you get your vote in. Currently, the Hobgoblin God is leading, but not by a lot. Like, almost all of them are around 20... So currently, Hobgoblins at 31, Elementals at 24, Totemics at 24. Nope, those switched. Now Elementals at 27, Totemics at 25, and Anti-Chaos is at 19. Hobgoblin is shrink down below 30, so it's getting heated.
That's close.
It's getting heated.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting. I will note that no, you know what? I'm not gonna say that. I don't want to influence y'all any further. So I'll let y'all figure it out. Christopher Clayton, Nuffle, triple skulls for the triple skull throne. Everyone knows Nuffle is a bastard.
Triple skulls.
He is the absolute worst.
Although I love Blood Bowl dearly, and I generally win it because I'm quite good at the game, but nevertheless, that triple skull.
Nuffle. I think Nuffle is the best representation of what it would actually feel like to deal with a Warhammer god, because you just dread him so much and are hoping he doesn't fuck you over as you're trying to play the game. Where you're like, all right, triple 3 skulls, reroll 3 skulls. Thoth Apprentice, Tengerism, let's go, Hobgoblin Sky God. Aijion Loma. So is there a reason why most gods don't have avatars or near physical manifestations of themselves, such as Alariel and Orion? I would say big yes. Gigantic, colossal yes. As for what the answer is, that's really complicated.
Yeah, if you go with the elves, it's because Ajuran said you can't do it. Okay, no. And avatars are something different. Something quite different.
I have theories.
as to what's happened with, say, Ilariel, Orion et al., that was allowed because Azurin did it. He did. We did it. Venerian is the first example of it. And then after that, the only gods that appear to do it are the elven gods, which speaks to potentially the nature of many of the gods and the ones that could or couldn't push their way through after that. There is a lot that could be said about this, and ultimately, because I highly doubt it'll be answered in a way that makes anybody happy by any of the Games Workshop writers, it's going to be up to yourselves and how you think it should work in your own individual games. For example, in LAWhammer, that's the game that we play over on our streams on the LAWhammer channels. I absolutely know how it works on our side. The whole story's made, but that's LAWhammer's version of it.
Yeah, I personally think that there's a lot of different ways you can play around with this to be really, really fun. Yeah. For instance, one of the things, why did our viewership numbers just like spike insanely?
It spiked approximately 20 minutes ago, if you weren't paying attention.
I guess I wasn't. I don't know.
It spiked massively on my side about 20 minutes ago.
Like over doubled.
Yeah, just like whap.
Okay, I guess everyone. We didn't get rated, did we? If we so, I should have thanked somebody, but I don't see anything. So
no, I didn't see a raid either. It just sort of went woof.
Okay, weird. All right, hello. Make sure you vote on the poll if you haven't already. It's still going.
Make sure you vote Dark Deeds.
Yeah. Also...
now there's more of you here. Buy Dark Deeds.
Yes, and if you do, Hawk, if you can actually throw those links in chat. Yeah, I don't know. That's super weird, but cool. Welcome. Yeah. Anyway. Before I get started, I will say, like, a personal fan theory I have. This is not supported. I want to make this very clear. This is just my personal interpretation that I think is fun to play around with. It would be the idea that a lot of gods don't like taking avatars because it can make them vulnerable. Like it offers them more control and presence in the material world, but it comes with dangers. But once again, I wouldn't say that's really supported by anything. Mornington Crescent, material silk. It's used in the finest bowstrings and armor. It also links to Cathay and potentially Slanesh. Oh, talking about like Martial silk. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, having like a that would actually be interesting. That would be like a really fun, very narrow, specific god. Would be like a god of silk or like a silkworm god or something like that. That ties into that. Probably won't. Not where we'll end up, but you know, there are some hilariously pigeonholed gods that you can find tramping around in the Warhammer world. Diamond Man, I suggest Staircase, god of all steps.
Staircase.
I don't know who that is. Staircase. Oh my god, you're banned.
Keep up.
Banned immediately. He's not allowed to be here anymore. I didn't see it coming. Get rid of him. Kill him.
It's a classic Warhammer pun. It's terrible.
Ricky Chapman, a great writer figure could be fun. They ride the wind, never spending time in one place for long, ever hunting upon the back of a bison or a buffalo. That is a very cool concept. That would make for a very fun. That could make for if we ended up with like the totemic or spirit option, that could be a interesting,
definitely
potential idea. Which go vote. Y'all got about like 2-ish minutes left. If you haven't voted yet. Asmon Entertainment. Hey guys, outside Archeon, did any Chaos character become the big bad nearly conquered the world? Yeah, the other 12 Everchosens.
All of them.
It may not seem like that's what they are.
And they are all, by their very nature, undivided, I suppose, if you must say such a thing, because they are empowered by all 4 Chaos powers, the great ones, plus potentially many minor as well.
Yeah, that being said, there would also be like, you know, your individual big bads for the individual powers outside of that as well, who I'm sure have gotten close to destroying the world so many times, and we just don't really hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, particularly if you look at a novel that says, "Oh, that was close to the world being destroyed, wasn't it?" And it's often just some random nod character created for that novel. So it's one of those things that the Warhammer world is known for almost coming to the brink on more than one occasion. Yeah,
we have a busted step before midnight clock. Like that poor thing is broken. Chapter Grid, Hobgoblin, Tingris, God of Storms, and Deception. If we end up there, that could be an interesting way to take it. A lot of people are suggesting Tingris, which I did Google and say, yeah, that could be appropriate inspiration as we go further. Okay, Twitch chat is over. I'm going to give y'all literally 2 more minutes to vote on YouTube.
Over on YouTube. Cool.
Vote now or forever hold your peace.
Do?
Twitch decided on totemic animal.
Oh.
It actually won by a pretty healthy percent compared to the others.
Interesting. I
yeah,
like that. I did not expect it either.
Neither did I.
Nice.
So they're full totemic animal.
So let's see how it balances out with YouTube's vote.
Jonathan Scott, you should create a fallen god of law to explore the darker parts of civilization like hierarchy, peer pressure, and conformity. Everyone's doing it. That is a very fun idea for a god, though. Might not work very well for the Eastern Steppes, but in certain kinds of, man, that could be a really fun god in like places in Cathay that the dragons could unintentionally be empowering almost in a sense. That would be a very fun god lurking around the alleys of Cathay. Mark RL. Hey guys, missed the Prague stream the other day because of work. I'm currently building a Mordheim Kislevites team from Prague. A friend is doing Anglo-Saxon inspired Albionites. Fun.
Nice.
Mordheim was great because you could very easily, with the smallest amount of fudging, put fucking anybody in Mordheim, and it was awesome. Like hell, there was even the expanded magazines for Mordheim. There's a fucking lizardman Mordheim faction, which is very funny.
Town Criers, and yeah, fun game.
Zar94, happy birthday. Well, thank you, Zar. Really appreciate it. It's very generous of you. Thank you so much.
Happy birthday to you.
We're caught up with super chats just in time to end the poll. And the winner at 33% of the vote is Elemental Spirit.
Okay. How high were they above the totemic animal?
Quite a bit. Totemic was only down at 20%.
Oh wow, that's quite a bit.
It was 32% for Elemental Spirit, 27% for Hobgoblin God, 20% for Totemic Animal, and 19% for Anti-Chaos. Yeah, almost.
So that's almost the flip of what was happening over in Twitch. And how was the result in Twitch again?
And Twitch was Totemic Animal was ahead, and then basically the other three were essentially tied.
So do we then say that we sort of do a slight amalgam of the two?
I think we can incorporate an animalistic element into it. I think that is fair, and would make sense for that region, considering there's not like great cities and civilizations kicking around. Yeah. Okay, so interesting. So we're not doing a Hobgoblin God. Now, that doesn't mean the Hobgoblins might not worship this entity. Because as we've talked about in prior streams, you go back and check out the Spider God stream. The Spider God is not a true greenskin god. It is a god that the Forest Goblins worship. Just like there are Night Goblins that worship good old Morslib, the Bad Moon. We're dealing with an elemental or a spirit of the land. So we have things like the sky, the wind, the sun. Ooh, boy. How are we going to put this into
mountains?
Yeah, how are we going to narrow this down a little bit? So I definitely think what element to go with would probably be the best next way to break it down a little bit. But that isn't necessarily as easy as saying like earth, wind, fire, water.
No, I agree. I mean, it might be worth looking to theme it a little bit more tightly rather than just going with the obvious elements. Well, the wind seems to be a very obvious one. With the wind sweeping across the steppe. The earth and the very land that they're working across seems to be another relatively obvious one.
Maybe we should do something like a geographical location. So a spirit that's tied to a specific place. And then a second option could be a nature option, which would be your sun, sky, wind. And then we can break down further once we get there. Your third one, I think could be, so a specific location, a specific like natural phenomena.
Okay, if you make it a natural phenomenon, then perhaps, no, I've just argued myself out of that in my own head. Nope, not going to say that.
A third one, when thinking like elemental, maybe could be more of I would say almost more of a like concept, like the concept of like moving from place to place, or a nomadic lifestyle. So we can say a concept,
a northern concept.
Yeah,
concept of the steppe.
Yeah, and then what would the fourth one be?
Does
I
need
get
a fourth one if you're happy with the three.
No, I think those three are fine because even if we did like War God and stuff, I would still put that under the third one.
Yep, me too.
Okay. Oh wait, no, fourth one. Ascended mortal.
Okay, so someone that's was once mortal, your Sigmar equivalent, or there's a host. Renald is often claimed to be an ascended mortal, for example. Demon princes of various kinds, Be'lakor would be a fine example of that also. The old ascended one.
Okay, I think that's a good cast. Okay, so we've got our geographical location god. So that would be like a specific mountain, a specific tree, a specific river, a specific location where there is a deity that you make offerings to in order to pass safely, or it empowers people that fight there, or it has like there are people that live around it because it offers protection or wisdom or all these other things. It's been there for fucking ever.
Yeah, this is a common type of deity. And for example, you take a look at the Empire pantheon. There's loads of examples of this. Delb, the god of the river Delb, and the great lake Delb, who is an almost chthonic entity of great fear. Or if you take, for example, Grandfather Reich, who is the god of the River Reich and the entire River Reich system, and is seen as an almost benevolent figure as long as you make offerings to him. If you don't, your boats go down. There's all manner of different gods for different important locations within the Empire, and it almost certainly is the case pretty much across the known Warhammer world.
All right, natural phenomena. This one's very straightforward. This is your sun gods, your wind gods, your rain gods, your all that. So something that just exists naturally in nature, but is not tied to like specific location or anything like that. Your concept god is something a little more esoteric, a little more high brain when you're dealing with concepts like the nomadic lifestyle, or constantly being on the move, or the concept of the hunt, or all these. So these kind of more idea type things. And then last is your ascended mortal, which is some kind of person or entity that ascends to godhood, but still represents in an elemental fashion. So someone that has died and risen to godhood, and has a unique interaction and expression through that concept. All right. Get copy paste all this over here. 2, 3, and 4. Y'all get 5 minutes on this one in the interest of time. Yeah, so you could have something like the first greatest whoever has ascended, and he represents like a particularly elemental type concept. If you were going to do the mortal thing, but natural phenomena is your sun, wind, air, water, whatever. Geographical locations, specific places that have a specific history and story behind them, and concept is your more weird things like a god that represents living a particular way, or represents a certain way of existence, or a very defined aspect.
Yeah, and if you were particularly keen on the idea of an animal god specifically, that's probably going to be more on the nature side. There's loads of examples of gods like this, like say Kakarol, who is one of the Ostermarker gods, a god of horses and a god of the dance. So yeah, there's lots of different ways we can go down with these things.
Yep. Getting caught up on some super chat stuff. Hobbs lost, but a win though, thematically. I mean, yeah, because I mean, this is depending on what we end up with, this could very easily be a god that you're able to the hobgoblins would acknowledge. Votes on Twitch and YouTube, that is encouraged. You can do that if you so wish. Donoman, the land itself / Mother Kislev / the Ancient Widow could be another example. Yeah, as like different like
she's a big example of a potential god or goddess that has inhabited a local area. Very easily potentially reviewed as almost a demon by some respects. So yeah, definitely.
The sky would be considered a natural phenomena. Yeah, natural. So if you wanted a sky god, that's what you would vote for. Did someone say nomadic? No,
Yes,
no one said
nomadic.
that.
I'm always amused by good old Addic the gnome. He has popped up in more than one piece of gnome writing for various pun-based reasons, and he was indeed the founder of Glimdwaro, the great city of gnomes in the Empire.
Warhammer and puns. We'll never escape
I
it.
know.
Ricky Tevin, we love the idea if it's a wind god that there's a tornado alley place that's holy. And when it's tornado season, their followers going to ride by their gods as they rampage through the steps. That's a very cool idea. That's a very cool concept that if we end up with the natural phenomena one, we could potentially explore. A wind god would definitely have a relationship with tornadoes. I mean, hell, I can tell you there's a lot of religious concepts behind tornadoes because I live in Tornado Alley. And there are like there are some ancient gods that you could hear about, or like mythologies and things that come from some of the Native American cultures. But even like just an American mythos, like I can't remember his name, but we literally have a folk hero who's I think he's a Texan folk hero. His whole concept is he has a lasso and he can ride tornadoes. So he throws lassos and catches them, and he's able to basically get up on them like they're a horse or a bull, and he rides tornadoes around parts of the world.
Just checking it up, tornadoes aren't very common in the East, particularly not in the North. They are almost exclusively, but definitely not exclusively, let's make sure we're clear on this, an American phenomenon. You don't get them almost anywhere else. It's certainly in the same degree. So if we are doing that, we are purposely choosing to effectively import an entire god influence into the material realm that is not naturally there. And that in and of itself is fun. Now, that doesn't mean you don't get tornadoes over in the East. You absolutely do. You get tornadoes sometimes in the UK, as ridiculous as that sounds to someone who lives here, having never seen one in my entire life. But you do get them here. But they are most commonly found in the Great Plains for obvious reasons when you take a look at the geography and how it all works.
Yeah, I would say we would probably be more likely to see a god that would use like searing wind in the Eastern Steppes, or like wind that blows so strong it just rips your flesh off, or it's like picking up rocks and stuff from the ground and just obliterating people. But it probably wouldn't express as a tornado per se.
But I could see the god himself perhaps being manifested as a tornado, or perhaps herself or itself. A great swirl of wind that could manifest and be brought down. That could definitely be a way of there's
definitely
that aspect.
Yeah, you could definitely see some art, like if you go look at like I think art from various like Eastern cultures, whether you're looking at Mongolian or Chinese or Japanese, that have these entities that like ride the wind or ride on zephyrs and stuff like that. Cody Smith, ascended fishman, get out. We already left the ocean. We're leaving it behind. James C. Gentos, nature god seems hard for Cathay and dragons to combat. They're not clear-cutting forests, etc. How do you see them trying to quash their worship? So what's interesting here is that you would have a situation of the dragons not wanting people to make offerings to acknowledge and interact with these deities, and you're right, it would be really hard to combat that. Like, they're fighting against like pretty much a natural force of the world, and I would say in many ways dragons are probably losing in most, especially rural places. But there are ways that the gods can be kind of pushed back, especially when you have a force as powerful as the dragons are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see this as a particular issue. By that I mean, the dragons have got a preferred outcome. There are gods in the Warhammer world which immediately conflict with that outcome because they want something different. Those gods may influence mortals. Some might cherish them, try to look after them. The dragons think they should be doing that, and very much do. So their primary weapon is their civilization that they are using and spreading through, and their civilization and the society that they espouse does not include religion, and anyone that pursues religion will be punished. So that's it. It doesn't need that much more detail here. Will it be hard? In some cases, yes. Will it be easy? In some cases, yes. And each one of the various deities and the influence that they have on the people will manifest in different ways. But no society is perfect and no rule is certain. So the dragons, for much that they may prefer to have one outcome, almost certainly don't when you actually get to what's happening there. There'll be lots of pockets of individual peoples who are still referring to a whole pantheon of local deities as and when required, knowing though that is absolutely unacceptable as far as their leaders are concerned, where the administration will come down from above, and if they find this sort of thing coming, someone turning to the gods in time of trouble rather than turning to the great machinery of the state, they are going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's basically the conflict, and that conflict being difficult for both sides is fine. It's good. It's exactly how it should be.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, polls over, and
Ooh,
the
what do we
winner
get?
is natural phenomena.
Ooh.
I will say Ascended Mortal put up a much better fight than I thought it would. So we had natural phenomena at 37%, Ascended Mortal at 27%, concept at 22%, and geographical location coming in at 12%. Y'all don't love geographical location gods as much as you should. They're actually very, very fun. But great, awesome. And Twitch chat actually went for Ascended Mortal, but unfortunately it was a pretty massive gap actual individual voice wise between those two. So natural phenomena.
How do you do over on Twitch as well? Because I didn't catch the Twitch vote.
Yes, Twitch went Ascended Mortal, but not by enough to like have a dramatic impact. It was Ascended Mortal, but there was a little bit of
sorry, Twitch, you were close. YouTube went a different direction, and we obviously marry between the two.
Yeah. And to be fair, there are a lot more people voting on YouTube. So
yeah, there are.
They have a rather significant weight. All right. So now what we need to do is we need to narrow it down to what type of phenomena. Now the question is, we could break this down into 2 votes, and we probably should to give as many options as we can.
I reckon let's keep it super simple and then bridge off that. So if you keep it super simple on elements, you make it easy. Fire, that's your sun. Wind, that's your air. Air is wind or swirling or whatever. Earth, there's your various nature, earthy mountains or whatever else you want from there. And then obviously water, that immediately gives you a super simple way for us to say it's one of those things, and then we can, once we've chosen one, drill down on with the second vote. So we can go pretty easy to begin with. And if you're looking for something wood-based, that'd be earth. It seems pretty easy to split it up here.
Yeah. So
grass for the grass god.
I mean, hey, I would expect the
open steppe and its nodding waves of grass.
Yeah. Which it would be so funny in a way to take that concept and make a god that's actually really scary out of that. Like an all-consuming grassland that never ends and you get lost in and you don't know the way out because it just seems to go on forever. So you pray to that god to just let you find a way out.
And you starve.
Yeah, you starve or dehydrate.
Dehydrate on the open plain.
Yeah. I mean, that would actually be a pretty scary god, to be fair.
It would be. And if you're looking for something like that, that'd be choosing the earth option rather than the wind option or the sun option. The blazing sun up in the sky would be fire. That makes a pretty obvious god choice for a big open steppe, particularly given that often when we're dealing with the northern parts of it, it's going to be frozen. So that god of fire is going to have an important component into their society.
Yeah, so think fire is your warmth, the sun, actual fire itself, brush fires and things like that caused by lightning hitting the ground or whatever, because brush fires would probably be a pretty severe threat in that part of the world. Air is the sky, wind, storms, things like that. Earth is the ground and everything that comes out of it. And then water would be your rivers. You could argue a little bit weather as far as like rains and floods and stuff. Especially if it doesn't rain often, floods would be a pretty severe threat. Lands that don't get a lot of rain, but then like a typhoon comes in from the ocean or what have you. And you get like these sunstorms and the ground can't absorb it. So it just floods and it's horrible and scary. Because I'll tell you, as someone that's been out lived down in West Texas, if you're in an area that doesn't get a lot of rain and suddenly rain shows up, that is one of the scariest fucking things on the face of the earth. Water is terrifying. Let's see. Chapter Graham, thank you. The Celestial Sky Con of the Umbral Storm. Slept a lot of cool words in there. But yeah, that is definitely something we could mess with. Gentleman says, natural god suggestion, Zilhan, god of storms. Is what I imagine a huge wyvern-like creature who hunts the very clouds themselves. His roar is thunder and lightning. Lightning is when his talons pierce the heavens. His name would be based on Zlant, a wyvern-like creature in Turkic mythology. That's an awesome concept. If we end up in Sky, we will bring this back up. Because that's a really cool proposal. Cole Patterson, Grass God definitely has Children of the Corn vibe. It would be a horrifying
that'd
god.
be horrible.
Like, it would literally be a horror god.
Lost in the waving, nodding grasslands. Oh, not good.
There's
the
actually
god that you'd be terrified of.
Yeah, I mean he would almost be that I should say he, she, it, they would be, that would almost be like in a way of really an interesting twist on almost a sea god of you're just praying to survive the trip, which is honestly kind of the scariest kind of god there is, where you need to be noticed by them because you want the good fortune of getting through without issues, but you also don't want to be noticed by them.
Yeah, you've got to make the correct offerings. If you don't make those offerings, you're in trouble. If you do make those offerings, you have now attracted their potential interest. So what do you do?
Especially with how far north the eastern steppes are, the influence a god would have on reality would be pretty high. So like literally as silly as it sounds, a grass god just trapping you for eternity.
I can't believe that the potential of a grass god is rising as our potential god of the day. Grass for the grass god.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong, it's genuinely spooky to think about.
It really is. It's making me quite pleased for the potential horror that could unfold from such a thing. But don't be entirely caught up in that. There is other options available.
Other great
we
options.
have horrendous burning sky gods. We have the wind gods that many people have obviously already thrown into the chat, and I think would make for a very thematically appropriate deity for the local area.
You got your sun gods, because the steppes don't have a whole lot of like different kinds of terrain to hide under. So you have a sun that's always watching, just beating down on you.
I think Flavor's actually figured it out.
A sea god on yeah. Leave your heresy at the door.
Might I also say, Flavor, that I just appreciate that you do spell the word flavor correctly. It's not flavor, it's flavor.
I do not. I'm going to stop before I get start a thing. Tokes, he's not that kind of grass god. I don't think toking is what he's going to offer you. Though, man, I honestly even though we're not, looking at the poll, I'm pretty sure we're not going to end up with it. My brain likes certain aspects of that very much. Hilarious. Well, guys, I gotta go, but can we call the main village the new wind god calls Oklahomeless? No. I don't want Oklahoma near my Warhammer fantasy. I don't want it to touch my Warhammer fantasy. Oklahoma is a hellhole. Everyone that's ever been there knows it. Everyone that lives there knows it. We don't need it in Warhammer. Warhammer exists for escapism from Oklahoma, not to go there. All right, I'm going to give you all about another 30 seconds to get your votes in. After this, I covered the super chat. We're gonna call it. Ricky Chapman, the breeze blowing in the grass on a warm, pleasant day to the rampage of the hurricane, the typhoon that rips apart Chaos Invaders and blows the scent of smoke to lost travelers. I feel like you're just trying to, a breeze god. Yeah. Oh, of like all the different ways a wind god could manifest. Yeah. I mean, regardless of what y'all pick, we're going to come up with a number of pretty interesting complex options. Because gods are fun and crazy and spooky. I will say the vote on YouTube is very close. I'm gonna count my head down from like 15. I guess I can count out loud since someone said anything. 14, 13, 12, 11. Sotek is racist against Oklahoma. No, I'm realist about Oklahoma. You don't understand unless you've been there. I say that with deep empathy and grief for my northern neighbors. Not that Texas is that much better a lot of the time. It really isn't, but Oklahoma is like, it's sad, man. All right, and we're calling it there. So the winner in both chats,
Oh, excellent.
is a wind elemental.
Love it. Let me just bring up, with that in mind, the comment from Jez. Amongst current Mongolians, they regard it as bad luck to whistle in a yurt, as it will bring the wind spirits inside.
We will totally feel that.
A super important point to bring up concerning gods. And gods in the Warhammer world are not just simply the divine entity itself, but they're also its divine servants. And in this particular instance, we get a very clear idea of what we could have as the wind spirits that are tearing across the open steppe. They are, much like, say, for example, the frost fiends that you might get in Kislev. They are representative of that deity, representatives of potentially great terror should you be on the receiving end of that god's ire. So I think that's quite a nice idea.
All right, the next poll. Here, no Oklahoma, double to Kansas. Kansas isn't a real place. It's literally
we're not
just
Kansas anymore.
It's just a field that people live in until their houses get picked up and thrown by tornadoes. So the next poll we're gonna do, this one's gonna be fairly quick because it's not that complex, but I'll let y'all vote for it, which is gonna be what aspect of the air is our god. So we're gonna go with a sky god.
Sky
we're gonna
god.
go with a wind god. Yeah, got a wind god.
Wind. Yep. Wind. Yep.
I would say there might not be 4 options on this one. So the third, I'm trying to think of a storm god. Storm god would be a good third one. Does anyone have an idea for a fourth?
Blue sky. That works quite well. I'm not sure you need more than that, at least to begin with.
I think that's got us covered, unless someone in the chat while I'm typing this out comes up. No, sun would be a fire god. We're disqualifying sun. Erosion and sound while y'all are
people are going for clouds as well. There, fog and mist, a little bit of the water in there. Doesn't seem to be. We're looking for something that very much epitomizes the northern open steppes.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say speed or stars or anything like that, or speed or erosion or sound, because those are concepts, and we axed concepts.
Yeah, we axed that.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything that jumps out at me, so I think no, stars I would not have put under air. I wouldn't put stars under air. I probably would have put that either with fire or some other weird thing. All right, so I think that's good enough. Let's fire it. So your options are the sky. Oh geez, there we go. Fix that. There we go. Your options are a sky god, the god of the great open blue sky, the things that are beyond the sky. So if you want, we could take a little bit of a Lore of Heaven's Azir type focus as well when dealing with the sky god. So if you're like, I want to have stars and northern lights and things like that, that would fall into the sky god. So if you want like the night sky and all that stuff. You also have the wind god, which is very self-explanatory. I shouldn't need to add anything to that. And then the storm god, also very self-explanatory. Storm god with the rolling thunder and the lightning and the hurricanes that come in from the ocean. And all that stuff.
Storm god is a classic of all pantheons, really. It's often associated with war. Also, many a god started their existence in the real world as a storm god. Even when it comes to Christianity, Yahweh was often marked as being, or Adonai, as a storm god in its very first iterations in the Hebrew pantheon. So yeah, there's lots of different ways a storm god can be used, and they can speak in different ways for how they could be reinterpreted into Warhammer.
Yeti, that is not why they're called Sky Titans, and one of the tragic things is we don't know a lot about them. Sky Titans are very mysterious. They had a culture, because when you look at them, they're so advanced, it's bonkers. But sadly, we don't really know.
And if we picked up Mountains of Morn, we could have definitely dived into that a bit more, but we didn't. We chose not to do that.
Yeah, if we didn't have Mountain of Morn, that we would have definitely talked about that.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, make sure to get your votes in and stuff. This has been pretty fun so far. We have ended up in a very different place than I was expecting at all.
Yeah, me too. I'm quite happy that we're in a different place too, because it means that who knows where this will eventually land.
Yeah, I was not expecting a non-hobgoblin focused Eastern steppe god when I gave y'all the whole world as your oyster.
Yeah,
and I'm pleased. Don't get me wrong, I'm very, very pleased. Donoman, to quote Wikipedia for reference, a Zillant is a legendary creature with the head of a dragon, the body of a bird, the legs of a chicken, the tail of a snake, the ears of a canine, the red wings of a bird or bat, sharp teeth, dark gray feathers, and scaly dark gray. Man, I will say, ancient cultures really loved kit bashing their monsters.
They
like,
really
oh
did.
boy,
Look at that kit bash bad boy. That one's horrific, which could make for really quite an interesting starting point.
Yeah,
we can kit bash more on it.
That's something we'll definitely very much keep in mind, because this is really the last stop before we start, I think, really focusing on like descriptions and stuff like that, which will be really, really fun. Think y'all missed some super chats? Did we? Oh my god, you're right, I did. I don't know how I did, but I did. Still loading. Maybe god of cold deserts with chilling dust storms.
Well, we didn't really choose Cathay where the deserts, so to speak, lie. Instead, we went for the northern steppes. So we're not really looking at deserts. We're looking at the open plains and the grasslands and the occasional taiga and the chill ice to the north of that. So we're not really looking at that as our core focus point. But I still think that would be super cool.
Yeah, that being said, if y'all go with the storm option, I could see a discussion about different kinds of storms, and dust storms would be something that would appear in that part of the world.
Definitely, if they're swooping up from the south. Yeah.
Necromancer Cobalt, which actually would be especially fucking scary if any of that dust came from the Warpstone Desert, because that dust would be horrible dust. Necromancer Cobalt, question: could natural phenomena gods be affected / created by a saturation of the winds of magic?
That's a complicated question, but the answer is, broadly speaking, no, because that is a material event. But a material event does stuff in the material realm, and depending on the nature of the god and whether it's tied through to the material realm or not, it can have effect. So the answer isn't no, it's no but. And there's always a whole bunch of buts where you could pick up individual tales where individual gods could be influenced by a great storm of magic in a local area. But broadly speaking, the answer is mostly no.
Yeah, that one, if you wanted to dive down to it, could get real weird real quick.
Yeah, agreed completely.
Okay, no, that one I did do. Okay, so I think I'm caught up now I'm just double checking. Yes, okay, I'm caught up. Sorry about that. Now back down to here. Praise Zeus the Sky Daddy. Nope, Zeus can stay in his the absolute bastard.
You know those giant sky gods.
Yeah, man, they can see everything. God of Farts, oh my god, Tex ass.
Wow.
Texas. Yeah, it's Chapter Grim, Storms, Glorious Storms, Channel Olgu be stormy.
Be stormy. Storms, glorious storms.
So Twitch chat is done, and Twitch chat actually did go for storms.
Oh, there you go.
YouTube chat, y'all are pretty strongly opinionated, but I'm going to give y'all just a couple more seconds. I'll get this last couple super chats.
Hammond, over on Twitch, and you really want your one to win, dive over to YouTube and click on the one that you think should win.
Yeah, your 30 votes will make the difference.
Hey, it may.
It may. Hammond, praise Lord Diaspiter. Diaspiter? Oh.
Diaspiter. I'm missing it, Hammond. Go to the sky.
It's a rep for something. So he did a pun for each of them. Well, he did just Zeus for Sky Daddy.
Oh, god damn it! This is really annoying me.
I feel like that's like an instrument to measure a barometer or something. I don't know.
I don't know. I missed it, Hammond. Sorry, didn't catch your joke.
Donoman, FYI, in real life, the Gobi Desert close to the Mongol steppes actually do have snow sometimes.
Yeah.
Which camels eat to get water in the winter. Yeah, I mean, if we'd ended up with a water god, I think dealing with like snow and blizzards and stuff like that would have been so
a lot of chill and cold up there.
Yeah, but that's going to be time, and the winner by a pretty significant margin is the Wind God.
Windy,
which I feel is very appropriate.
I think a divine wind in the north, that I think makes a lot of sense. It can have all of the shredding ice when it's coming from the north slicing through it, or alternatively the wind whistling through the various grasslands, causing the grass to bow, causing all of those who are moving from one place to the next to hunker down and try to avoid the worst that this horrendous wind has to offer.
Oh, so Diaspora is a Proto-Indo-European god. It sounds familiar.
That's just
I
one
just
I
can't,
missed. God damn it.
yeah,
Thanks for that.
I just can't put my finger of it.
Thank you very much, Hammond, for confirming that.
Oh, the trait. Okay. So, but yes, we have our wind god, which comprises a lot of really fascinating elements and would be essential to life on the Eastern Steppes. The wind at your back, allowing you to move faster and without, as much difficulty, versus the wind coming at you, which would slow you down and make life harder. A god that could very much fuck with where you're trying to go. Praying for calm winds when you're trying to rest, and for strong winds when you're trying to flee or move somewhere quickly. For the wind to be in your favor if you're archers and you're firing arrows. It would be a very important god in matters of warfare. And turning your opponent's ranged weapons back against them, or at least making them veer off course. A lot of those various aspects. So now the next poll, I think that would be, now the question is, at this point, do we have enough little tidbits on the god that we could start worrying about what it looks like? Or do we want to, because I really feel like any of those particular little aspects are all things that could fit our god very nicely. It has a very easy application in matters of war, in matters of travel, in matters of survival. But the question is, where do we go next as far as designing our god? Donoman, off the beat suggestion, the wind god could be a divine butterfly, in reference to the whole butterfly effect, in that its wing beat causes a hurricane across the world type thing. That's an interesting idea. So I almost wonder if appearance would maybe be the next thing.
Well, if we go by the old create your own god thing, the next thing very much is, what do we base it on? What is our god based on? If we literally pull out the old Realm of Chaos book, which is always a fun place to pull out. Here we go. Your first choice is you choose a mortal creation as effectively the basis for this entity. Is it humanoid? Is it a creature of the air? Is it, it could be a humanoid. There's lots of gods that appear humanoid but are associated with the air. Most gods, in fact, have that. Do we want to go animalistic and make it an animal? Do we want to go spiritual and make it something perhaps ephemeral, like the very wind itself? More like a zephyr rather than necessarily something which has that tangible feel. Maybe it's a god that is quite literally the heavens or the clouds, or it's constantly looking down on you. There's lots of different ways that we could work this through.
Yeah, okay. So I think I like those three options of a humanoid god, an animalistic god, or a more of a spiritual entity.
Sounds good to me. And if it's animalistic, it could be any type of animal or mixture of animal or classic hodgepodge between one thing and the next.
Yeah, we'll figure that out, whether we want to go with like a whole animal or a chimeric entity. So that would be what we would go to next. So if you're like, I want an eagle god, or I want like a mythical creature, or yada yada yada, then you would want to vote for animalistic. Humanoid god, very self-explanatory. A god that appears humanoid, something that would be considered like a god that people would draw in like a human form, wielding particular items and having like a mythos behind it. A god that's more, I almost would want to say like meant for people to try and relate and understand to or empathize with, versus the others. All right, that poll is up. You got 5 minutes while I grab incoming super chat stuff. The butterfly option, that would be animalistic as well. But if you're like, I prefer like a more human aspect, but maybe he wields like a piece of equipment from a particular animal, or he has like an animalistic part, then I would say go humanoid if you want more of that like demi-human entity. Aliflux, all right, my ploy has succeeded. How will you integrate this god with farting? It's not an ogre god. It is not the god of breaking wind. It is a wind god. Farting, I feel like, would be a concept, not an elemental spirit.
Just to answer this question specifically, humanoid will be anything that's human in shape. It could be green skin, it could be elf, dwarf, human. Basically, it's got a humanoid shape. It could be ogre, it could be big, small, anything in between. It appears to be, whether it's demonic in origin, all sky-like in origin, or whatever else, human in shape.
Yeah, it could be the great ogre god whose great feat is that he breaks wind, and that's the great wind that tears across the steppe. There you go. Hammond, how about a humanoid-esque bird god? Yeah, you could absolutely do that, where it's a humanoid, but they have big, great bird wings, or they have feathers.
I will note that gets a little bit closer to Greater Demon of Zinch than I prefer, so you'd have to be careful with that.
Yeah, Battlefoot, the Thunderbird, a bird that could eclipse the sun on the plane, whose beating wings drive the wind itself out from it. Yep, that is certainly an option. We could go down with the animalistic path. I think once we go down animalistic, we'll probably talk about like whether we want like a creature of the air like birds and stuff, or whether we want a terrestrial creature or something along those lines. We'll figure that out when we get there. Hammond, humanoid bird god riding Goku's cloud. You're adding more and more interesting taken from other concepts nearby. Captain Magma, a good animalistic form could be a Roadrunner-esque. I don't know if they have I don't think they have Roadrunners in that part of the world.
I'm not convinced that they do.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are native to my hemisphere.
Yeah, totally.
Because we would want to use creatures that are native to that ballpark, as opposed to importing something over from the west. I could be wrong though. I don't think Roadrunners are over there.
Yeah, bison, camelids, rats, dogs, marmots, pumas, foxes, quail, bustard. That's a good bird.
An animalistic quaddle with beaks. Ban him. Time him out.
Insects, snakes, and lizards. Pampas cats.
Throw Hammond in the meat grinder immediately. If it's a land creature, then surely horses. I mean, yeah, a horse would be an option that we could discuss. Yeah, with if we go with a terrestrial thing. Yeah, when we get to animalistic, your options will probably be like, I think the next thing we would do would be a binary option between a chimeric or a. Actually, you know what? I think I could just go ahead and call this vote. Yeah, this one is so
far ahead.
So far ahead, it's not even funny. So yeah, we can go ahead and call this one. Oh God, I always forget how to end a poll early on Twitch. I think I can do. Nope. Whatever. Hurry up and vote. Hurry up and vote. Sage says a fox god. No fox gods. Those are causing enough problems somewhere else in the world at the moment. A mighty flying fish. Donovan, although personally I think a winged animal would be cooler, the tulpar is a celestial flying horse in Mongolian mythology. Yeah.
I'm gonna go check that one up.
So yeah, I think the next big step, I mean, we could go with the fox god, but I think the next big step that we go would be whether we want to do like a whole animal or a chimeric animal.
Interestingly, the tulpar is almost really close to being the equivalent of a Pegasus.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's quite simpler.
Not always. The different depictions have got slightly different views, but yeah, some of them are pretty cool. Kazakhstani one is well cool. 2 golden tulpars.
That pulls over. Animalistic wins by a fucking landslide.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, I think you should be given a white scar. No, bad. Hit with fan.
I mean, it's not necessarily bad.
Get your 40k reference out of my seat.
Well, you could have a deeply scarred entity. So it's not so much a white scar, but a very scarred god who has been slapped by the wind. Of course I know what he's angling for, but it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. There's nothing wrong with a reference or two.
Okay, so for the next vote, which is what kind of animal, part 1, is our god. What kind of animal is our wind god? So your main options would I'm gonna make this one very simple. And I'm gonna have this one shorter. It's only gonna be a 3-minute vote. So when I say it's live, you need to hurry up and fucking vote. So we're gonna do a whole animal versus a chimeric animal. So a chimeric animal is an animal that is like got other bits and parts and pieces. So like
it's a
flying
bash.
Yeah, it's a flying horse.
Kit bash or not a kit bash.
Yeah. Kit bash or not a kit bash. So an animal that's whole in the package. So like an eagle god would be a whole animal. or
Indeed.
a
And there
horse
is a
god.
steppe eagle. There's a particular eagle from the steppe that's particularly well known. So that could be easily the case.
Yeah, or you're like, oh, I want it to be some kind of serpent-like creature, or I want it to be a wind fish, or I want it to be like any of these other things. Those will be whole. If you're like, no, I want something that's got like this part of this and part of this and part of this, like some of the creatures we talked about earlier in the stream, or you want like a horse with wings, or like any of those other mixes, then you want to go for the chimeric option. So whole animal or chimeric animal. I'm actually very curious how y'all are going to vote on this one, because this one I feel like you could make a lot of great arguments either way.
Yeah, and you'll note that of many of the Warhammer gods, they rarely go chimeric.
Yeah, chimerics are super rare.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the animal emblems of the god, the elven gods are always individual animals, or alternatively, the human gods are much the same individual animals. And those rare other gods that we see picking up here, they're things like the spider god or some equivalent. They tend to be individual species. So if you're looking to create something different, you could kit bash, or if you'd look to create something that actually fits in with all the other deities, it'd probably be a single god. I mentioned Kakarol, for example, earlier on. That's a horse god that you find over in the east of the Empire. There's lots of different ways that we could go here.
Or something like a feathered dragon. I would probably classify that under whole. Because it's not like a bunch of different parts put together. So if you if you want a particular mythological creature like a griffin or a dragon or something like that, I would still go with whole, because it's not like kit bashing a bunch of different. You can explain it by simply saying
unique expression of it. And I'd also say that if you're going for, say, as we were discussing before, the Tulpar. The Tulpar is an already existing winged horse from the real world that has legends across the open steppe. So that would be a winged horse, which for all that we view that as chimeric, because you don't get winged horses in the real world. In the Warhammer world, it's very much just a fixed animal, because that's something that exists in Warhammer.
Oh, the Saiga is really weird looking. So
I'm not looking at Saiga. I'm going to go check that one.
Gypsy Slap says, check out the Saiga. They're a bizarre antelope in Mongolian. Look like a weird Warhammer creature. Yeah, they do. You got a big old nose.
That's one hell of a proboscis. Look at that thing.
Let's see. Getting caught up on super chat stuff. A snake that whines like the wind. A, kind of hilarious. And B, absolutely, you could do that. Sean Soltz, make the Quaddle with the beak the animal for Sotek. I will kill you and everyone you love. Hammond, put an option with my mother-in-law. Maybe that would go under chimeric. I don't know. Siri Esco, I don't know where this fits, but feather dragon. So yeah, so anything that you could describe very simply like that would go. Let's put it under whole animal.
On that, I'm going to pop out for a moment. We all know where I'm going.
Yeah. The great mystery. Chapter Grant, Hippogriff, it'd be so cool. Hippogriff. If we did like a mythological species that's already well expressed in another part of the Warhammer world, we would want to do, I think, more of we'd have to express it in a unique way. But the big thing that I would say is when you're considering your vote, I would say think about, if you want an animal that we can draw a lot of easy real world inspiration from, and have a more clean, and also it fits better with the Warhammer world as it's designed in general, you would want to go with whole animal. That it typically jives better. The focus is better with how Warhammer already functions. But if we want to rely more on like a mythological entity, that is like pulled from real world mythology, and stuff like that, we'd probably want to lean more into the chimeric angle. The chimeric angle is going to be a little bit more, it will probably result in it being a little more pigeonholed as far as some things relating to it, like divine servants. But there's several different ways it could be interpreted. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote here. And just for the record, there are very few of you voting compared to how many are apparently watching. Vote, damn it! Don't be lazy. I need at least 100 votes. At least 100 votes. At least 1 in 6 of you guys.
100 votes. There we go.
They're just being lazy. People that are just getting
Or
comfortable.
they're listening as they do something else, as all too many of you out there in Lorebeards are prone to doing. Painting miniatures, perhaps. That's a very common one, or just working with your headphones on.
Lean over and tap one button on your screen real fast.
Tap, tap.
All right, that's good enough for me. All right, so the winner on both chats by a pretty good amount is a Chimeric.
Chimeric it is then. So where do we start? Well, it's clearly going to probably have wings.
Yeah, definitely is going to have wings.
Yeah. So we're starting with wings. Where do we go from there? Maybe we want to decide on a base creature. And it's your birthday, so you get to choose. Well, it's not really your birthday anymore. It's your almost birthday. You get to choose which one of the 4 base creatures you'd like to use.
Okay, so actually, I think what I'd like to, for one of the options, for me, I would like to have, I'm going to say, IRL myth. And what I mean by that is we will look at actual, like in our world, real mythological creatures from that ballpark. That a number of people in chat have suggested those ideas. And we can... Ian's unboxing his Dark Deeds.
Yeah,
drop that now.
I'll join you. I'll unbox my Dark Deeds.
Andy, please.
Thank you so much for purchasing Dark Deeds. I hope you enjoy playing it. You have made me very happy, and I feel like I now have to pour myself a quick drink.
Yeah, you gotta have a little drink for that. So I think for the first option, I'm gonna say IRL myth. So this would be us turning our attention to creatures that people have mentioned throughout the chat, which would be creatures and mythological entities that are around in those ballparks, and a number of people have suggested a bunch of those, and we'll take one of those and then build off of it. The second option, I'm gonna say wolf. I think with all like how important the giant wolves are to the Hobgoblin Khanate and all that stuff, giant wolves are a huge aspect of life over there.
Horse.
I think horse is good.
Horse
for the third
seems to be a very obvious one. Swift wind horses. And whether that's a winged horse or equivalent doesn't really, we know it's going to have wings, so horse is a good one too. And
then I think for the fourth option, I'm going to go with bird, or eagle. I'll say eagle.
Did you buy a copy near the beginning of the stream? I don't know if I took a drink, but I'll add a little extra in just for you, Yeti. Thank you very much for purchasing Dark Deeds.
Sacrifice he's willing to make.
Yeah, I'm Scottish, so I tend to not really get drunk unless I have drunk literally everything. So, yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoy your game.
All right, so what is the base of our Chimeric god? Your options are IRL myth, wolf, horse,
eagle,
and eagle.
Eagle seems to be a good one. There's several eagle types up there. Or some equivalent bird if we eventually land on something slightly different. But a big bird of prey.
Yep, that will work. So yeah, big angry bird. Let's see. Do that. Horse and eagle. This one I will give y'all. I'll give y'all 3 minutes on this one. Some people are suggesting some fucking wild compositions in chat. Okay, we'll get to there. Let's see. Sarmalian Bloodweaver, bearded vulture god that was popular in countering necromancy with vampires because it eats undead physically and scours their souls on the wind. That's cool. That's a neat idea.
There's a big river of death kicking around too.
Yeah, and there would be the idea of what do people do with their dead on the steps. If we end up in the eagle department,
we'll pick that one up because it's a real bird. Yeah, the vulture, eagle, big bird of prey type thing fits together very well.
Yeah, so if the bird god wins, we'll come back to this. BFG, sorry, 40K. Make it a Night Stalker. What the hell's a Night Stalker?
Battlefleet Gothic, BFG. Great game. Played that game more times than I care to mention. And I had massive chats with Andy Chambers about that game actually because he obviously designed it. And it's a game that I have a deep well of fondness for.
Oh, if this is from this thing, wow, that thing is fucking terrifying. No, thank you, Jesus Christ.
I have to look now.
Yeah, type in Night Stalker animal, otherwise you're gonna get the movie. But it's basically like a big bat that is awful. Jesus, all right. Ricky Chapman, a bison. Oh, I should have said bison is one of the options. Oh well. Hey, you know what? If we end up with horse,
you see that Night Stalker? That's actually from. It's not real, obviously. That's from a book called I can't remember what it's called. It's called Future Animals, and it's where everything.
I would surely hope not.
Yeah, it could evolve to if humanity just died out, and it takes all of the existing animals that are in the real world just now and says what would evolution do to them. And this was a bat that effectively ends up walking on two legs and loses its wings. I had that book as a kid. I loved it.
Yeah, I will note if we end up with horse, I will consider bison a potential offshoot of that.
Yeah,
for those that are.
Although bison are exactly not known for their wind, other than.
Well, I mean, if it's like a running, I thought that would have been better for a storm god. If we had a storm god, a bison would have been good for like the rolling thunder if it's charging
and lightning rolling off its charging hooves.
Yeah, so I don't think bison necessarily fits with what we want to do for wind. Bernard Demerval, belated but fabulous anniversary of thy escape from the maternal embrace. Thy escape from the maternal embrace. That's fun. Sotek, a question for the lads. What do you think is some hidden depth / story hooks for the ogres? We've talked a bit about this if you go check out our Goldbag Maneater stream or our Great Maw stream. But especially with the Maneater stream, ogres are significantly smarter than a lot of people give them credit for. And they often get kind of flanderized by writers as just being big orcs, which they're not by any stretch of the imagination. They're really not. They have a deep appreciation for the cultures of others, which is really fascinating. And I think they're in a weird way, like both not and yes at the same time. They appropriate culture in really fun and interesting ways. Would be the best way I think I could actually put it. And I think really delving into the idea of how the ogres consider what has value to them and what doesn't, and taking it in very unexpected directions could be really fun, beyond just the eating and fighting. But what are the other parts of cultures that they adapt, and why do they try to appropriate those aspects? Could be really fun.
Yeah, I'll add, and again, thank you very much for welcoming Sotek into the world. I'll add perhaps tying in some hooks that directly speak to their very close relationship with halflings, which is something that's often forgotten, both by writers and by players. That ogres and halflings get on with each other like a house on fire. Now, that doesn't mean the ogres aren't going to eat the halflings. That doesn't mean the halflings are going to trust the ogres, but they are genetically predisposed to work with each other. It's one of the reasons that the Mootland, for example, has more ogres in it than any other part of the Empire. Lots of ogre mercenaries pass through that area, and it's not just to eat the halflings. So I would probably jump on a host of fun halfling-based story hooks and adventure ideas for that. Perhaps having a halfling gaffer cornering the market and local ogre labor, causing a lot of difficulties with the human local guilds, or something similar to that. Bring up stories about how the halflings manage to get the ogres on side and no one else can, and it really upsets, because we're looking for a conflict to be the start of that particular story hook.
Yeah, I will note, so Wolf won the Twitch vote. You two vote, y'all are neck and neck between IRL Myth and Wolf. I'm going to give y'all like another couple of minutes. If Wolf can gain a few more, like 1 or 2 more percentage points, I'll give it to Wolf. But IRL is currently winning, even with the Twitch. But like, it's very close. I'll give y'all just another couple minutes.
So again, if you're on Twitch, make sure you dive over onto YouTube. And while we're here, if you have yet to press subscribe on Sotek's channel, what the hell are you even doing here? Goodness sake, people, press subscribe. And of course, all those likes and ringing bells or whatever else you think super important. But we would really like your subscriptions too, because that means whenever we're doing something like this, you will be reminded and you won't miss our future chats about crazy Warhammer stuff.
Dogman, for an IRL mythical creature slightly further south in Iran, is the Chimeric, dog or bird / dog hybrid. They're one of my favorite mythical creatures. I am well familiar of it thanks to the Worm webcomic, where the Chimeric features quite heavily. This thing is unfortunately quite far away from where we are, and is part of like different cultural makeups. Persian. Yeah, so I wouldn't want to call upon the Chimeric. I love the Chimeric, and I want it in Warhammer very badly. Because it's cool, but I would not bring it up for this particular.
It's well cool, but
thing.
It's Persian. It's Persian en route.
Cody Smith, panting wolf makes the wind. I mean, yeah, I don't think the god necessarily needs to make it so much as be it, though it is kind of funny to imagine it just being like happy to see people.
Although there's, I think there's something relatively mythic in terms of how that can be. You can imagine a majestic, tall, wolf-like creature, and I don't know why, but in my head, it's suddenly been animated by the chap who did Samurai Jack. Don't know why. If you've ever seen Samurai Jack, you'll know what I mean. This long, elongated feature with a head tall and the great wind that it emits as it sits there. Oof, oof, whoosh.
I was gonna say it's howl. It's howl, literally being like a bellow.
And then, ooh, yeah, that could be super cool as well.
Laughing God, a flying Mongolian death worm.
Yeah,
I feel like
a thing.
The moment you make it flying, it ceases to be a death worm. But Necromancer Cobalt, a bird, centaur, bird body, and archer top. That would be a very different.
Centaur would certainly work quite nicely, given that you've got that great galloping across the open steppe.
Okay. Y'all ended in a bit of a tie.
Oh dear.
So
that means that ultimately, look, the Mongolian death worm is actually apparently a thing.
Oh yeah. It's a super famous mythological thing.
I did not know of this thing. It's horrible.
It's awful. I if I recall correctly, it's pretty heavily the inspiration for the Tremor movie.
It's not a very commonly known one, but it's around. Look at that.
Yeah, and it's like if it bites you, I think it's got like a horrible venom, and you're gonna die, and all sorts of other horrible shit. It's a nasty piece of shit. All right, so
wind horses are super common. There's like loads of them all over the place for Mongolia.
Yeah, so
sometimes called a gas horse.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, the word actually originates from the word soul. It's a soul horse that tears through the heavens.
So, Twitch chat chose for the wolf to win. YouTube chat, IRL Myth won, but only by 1% with wolf
that's
right
super
behind.
Close.
So I kind of think that's essentially a tie.
So then, if it's a tie, that would be, what was it, a tie between Wolf and
IRL Myth.
So you could combine.
We could.
Okay, so the most common that I can find in real life is some form of winged horse or flying horse. There's different versions, and it's a common component of East Asian, Central
and remember,
Asian.
Chat, we are building a chimeric god, so it's not just a wolf god. It's got a wolf base.
Yeah, this is the starting point.
So I saw
what we could do is easily combine that horse entity with a wolf entity. So horse and wolf as our starting point would be the obvious choice from that.
Horse, unfortunately, did not do super well, though. If you're talking about IRL Myth.
Yeah, IRL Myth is the most common one, and I think it's appropriately most common given the cultures involved and how important horses were for them. You can see why.
I almost wondered like a wolf that has hooves, rather than
wolf?
rather than
weird.
paws.
Love
He's got like hooves that strike the ground.
Yeah, there's definitely something in this. I will say this is oddly interesting. We've over on Rookery Publications, which is the lovely little company, What I Do on the Dirt Days, along with lovely people like Mark Gibbons and Andy Liska et al. We have an enormous creature that is effectively a winged wolf that takes part in one of our very first adventures. So this is already relatively close to my wheelhouse, and the piece of art that Mark has done for it is freaking awesome. Absolutely cool.
When can we see it?
Whenever we decide to release it, because that book is finished. But we are currently building an entire system to support it now.
So I like this for what Laughing God said. I like the idea that it's got the front paws of the wolf with the claws and everything, but its back paws are hooves that like strike the ground and create like the wind of sparks, of the idea of the eastern steppes get so dry that when the wind is tearing across, the friction of the grass spontaneously causes fires, and they say, it's its hooves striking the ground as it tears across the earth. with its hooves kicking up fire. I think. Oh, interesting. I did not know that. There were real hooved wolves.
There you go.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've got a wolf horse hybrid with the front paws of a wolf, the back paws of a horse, kind of taking after our hippogriffs, and which is great, cool. And it's got wings, big old golden eagle wings.
Well, steppe eagle wings.
Steppe eagle wings. Aijon says, all this Eastern Steppes and Wind God gives me the feel of the Shadow of the Colossus, the bird boss.
Oh, heck, I haven't played that game for years.
Very reasonably, I would say. Very, very reasonably. Let's see. Very outside of the Eastern Steppes, but check the Zubonator from Romania. It's a winged wolf. We could maybe take a quick peek at that. Oh my god, that thing is fucking terrifying looking. It's got like wyvern wings and scales on a wolf. My lord.
Holy crap.
That is a badass looking monster. You would not catch me fucking with that thing. But once again, very far away from where we're kind of operating. If you want a wolf with hooves that existed for real, the Andrewsarchus was a giant mammalian predator.
I like the name.
It's you think the scientist that discovered it was having didn't necessarily try super hard. It was an ungulate.
Whoa, that thing looks weird.
Its closest living relatives are whales and hippos.
I actually quite like the look of that, but it's heavy. Look at it. It's a heavy looking thing. There's a couple of interesting renditions that I'm just looking at the various ones up here, which are far more wolf-like.
Oh, that is interesting.
That's I winged that thing up, although it doesn't seem fleet, and you really want this idea of something that's super fleet of foot, but it no longer looks like something that's necessarily a wolf per se. There's some really good artistic representations.
Yeah, but it does interestingly have like almost like a wolf and a horse head combined.
Yeah, it does, and I quite like some of the artistic renditions where it's got stripes down its back, because that gives you the idea of camouflage sitting on the step with the long grass.
Oh, love that. Oh, yeah, stripes. Absolutely stripes. Because in that environment, stripes are like... honestly, I think if we made it a little sleeker, like a little hungrier looking, took some of the weight off to make it more of a wind god.
Yeah, it's a bit stocky for what we're looking for here, but I do think it's got a really nice look. So again, if you're out there currently doing your web searches, Andrewsarchus is a brilliant name, and it really does feel like someone called Andrew Sark or something similar went, yes, Andrew Sark us, that's me, named it. I'm gonna go check where it gets its name from, because it's actually ridiculous. It means Andrew's ruler, so the ruler of Andrew, and they are found in the east.
Oh yeah, they're found in parts of China, so this would actually be
totally
very reasonable.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually kind of fuck with this. I would say let's maybe put like hooves on the back feet to give it that true chimeric feel, and slap wings on it. Give it a pair of big old wings. Donovan, I did miss that. Hold on, let me dig that one up, because I know you said that earlier. Let's see, we also have this one. To be fair, there's one form of bison. Yeah, true, the sky bison. But I would say that's specifically why we wouldn't want to do that, because it's already been done. I know you had another one back here. Oh God, where is it? Unfortunately, super chats in this system do not play nice. Always. How long ago was? Okay, I'll just read it off here. If it's a wolf, I say it's not one, but a pair of wolves, like a pack. The howl of one wolf could bring the howling winds of winter, and then the other wolf howls to bring spring. That could be an interesting idea in and of itself, that the god is not considered necessarily an individual, but instead there's like... I feel like that would fall more into divine servant territory, as opposed to the god itself.
I agree. Where you get the divine servant, one of whom is known for whistling down from the north, howling in with the winds, and the other one that bounds across the open plain, bringing spring in its wake and bringing life afterwards. So the two wolves, or the two creatures at least, that are representative of this particular god, which is a far bigger, far
Yeah,
stockier one.
I would say, especially when you look into a lot of the Mongolian myths around like wind, or even Native American cultures and wind gods, you tend to get the idea that the winds coming from different directions are often interpreted as unique entities in and of themselves. Where like the north wind, the south wind, east wind, etc., because they bring different things. Where like, you know, the wind that comes in from the ocean brings the salty air, it brings the typhoons and the great storms off the sea, or the wind that comes down from the north brings cold and chaos and death. The wind that comes from the south tends to be warmer, but and brings like summer and spring and stuff like that. And the wind that comes in from the west would do something. I actually really like the idea of this god. Its pack, its children are the divine winds. Each of these individual winds are one of its pups that represent a wind in a particular coming from a particular direction that brings certain aspects that is acknowledged by the cultures and peoples that live on the Eastern Steppes. I think I like that a lot. Oh no, Stup Eagle, please do not. The God Wolf, please do not. I know humans are gonna do everything they can. What are you doing, Step Bro? No, bad. All of you bad. Please do not the wolf step god. Leave him alone. Leave it, he, she, it alone. Cody Smith, gods with wings IRL are flying foxes. The cute dog goes, yeah, sweet cute bats. If we were doing like an Australian god, I would want to do a flying fox god. So I'm actually thinking, I actually really think, I like the idea of a she-wolf god that has these pups that are the different winds.
So the goddess herself is the source of all of the divine wind across the open steppe, and her pups, perhaps all male, are responsible for the various winds that come down from the north, south, east, west, or equivalent. I think there's definitely something there that you could at least move towards a mythic version of the wind itself and all of the benefits certain winds come with and the negatives that certain winds come with, meaning that some of the pups are seen in a good light and some of them are very much not. You do not want to attract this particular.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the pup of the north wind would be like, that's borderline a death god. Like that is a horrifying, terrible god. I also really love I love the kind of the imagery we've come up with, which we can if anyone has any other things they'd really like to talk about of like, oh, let's add another feature, feel free to suggest ideas. But the Andrewsarchus, but thinned up a good bit, but she has, you know, big bird steppe eagle wings coming off of her back. Her back paws are hooves. Her front paws are the typical, almost more wolf paws, but she has that general shape. Plus, it being called the Andrewsarchus is so hilariously perfect. It is stupid. Like,
the
good job, title man.
That the Andrewsarchus.
Yeah, that so terrible. Oh, that's such a cool idea, Cody Smith. That the tornadoes are like, or the fighting winds, or the pups fighting.
Dervishes and winds and swirls and things when things are going wrong with the pups fighting and nipping at each other's, perhaps not play fighting, real fighting sometimes. Perhaps the brothers have deep hatreds for each other, and deep hatreds for other things as well. So some of them will be play fighting, but other ones really are not play fighting at all. That's when the mum is away and the dogs start to bite deep.
Oh, that's so cool, because then there's the idea of like, because she's the mother wolf, like at times she's at home and the winds are calmer, they make sense, they're more reasonable. But there are times she goes off to hunt, and when she goes off to hunt, the children fight. And when the pups are fighting, the winds get far more chaotic and ugly. It's a season of war. It's a season of staying on the move.
You can also have one of her kids having effectively fallen to chaos, for want of a better myth,
it and represented,
right? That's the wind that sweeps right down from the north, and that wind is changeable. You can never be certain what that's going to bring, and that's a divine servant that comes hand in hand with the chaos gods from the north, possibly even attacking with them.
We're not naming the god Shakira. Donoman, you could have the pups eternally be different ages. So the spring pup is an actual puppy or very young. The summer wolf is more juvenile. The autumn is a premature wolf, and the winter is the old bitter wolf.
I definitely think there could be something in that as well. Although, when you're pinning down these sort of details, this is where we really move from just theory crafting to wanting to look into all the individual myths and stuff from the real world. So you can go, oh, we want bits of this and bits of that, and figure out exactly what works best. But I think there's definitely something in that too.
Yeah, Janjos puts up a good point. The mutant chaos wolf of the north being this horrible, mutated, lost creature that like distorts and ruins. The one that kills without eating, that doesn't use all of the components, that doesn't travel lightly, but it's this horrible destructive force that ruins everything before it. I also really like, because this would also open up the idea of like you could tie it well into the peoples, whether it's the hobgoblins who would obviously pray to this great she-wolf for their giant wolves, for their wolves to be as fast and powerful as they could be. For the wind to be in there, like the hobgoblins would observe this deity, I would say, beyond a shadow of a doubt. I can even see this deity having a good amount of influence in ancient times down in Grand Cathay, in Nippon. It's still a wind god that travels across the sea and stuff. One of the things that would be very interesting to me about this as well is that this would tie in well to particular aspects of cults that worship it. You could have these tribes of chaos that are further north from the Eastern Steppe and come down that do worship the wind gods, but they worship the pup that's fallen to chaos. And they have
I don't think again necessarily worship's the word we're looking for here.
Sorry, observe.
Because it's not even necessarily observe them. It's the gods of the local area. So you are effectively providing offerings to it, so it doesn't observe you in many respects. So I think you start wanting to build trappings around it. So perhaps, given the nomadic nature of what they are, we'd be looking for long streams of prayer flags, showing the different versions of the gods that you're trying to watch for. And perhaps there's even local myths of when a particular wolf is going by, only certain flags lift up, showing that particular divine wind has passed by.
Yeah.
So you get those ideas. A little bit like Tibetan prayer flags, if you've ever seen the Tibetan prayer flags and how they sit. So something similar to that, except a little bit more northern rather than southern Asian. And
I also imagine like a cool, like coming off the mountains from Cathay, like when spring is coming or summer is coming, there's like a channel through the mountains, the ancient Giantland mountains, where at a certain time of year, when the wind is channeled into it, it goes through all these rock formations, and it sounds like a giant wolf's howl that rings out for like hundreds
that makes
of miles.
For a really nice local myth. And also, and in terms of like local observance, you could have the great yurts, the tents that they've got, all of the guy ropes that are hanging off them, lined with prayer flags and wind chimes and similar ideas. In fact, yes, sacred wind chimes.
Yeah, the sacred wind chimes.
Each one of them marked out for one of the goddesses' unruly sons, that will be picking up and dingling according to which one of those particular wolves entities might be running by. And if they're just flapping normally without anything sounding, then it's fine. But it's when the chimes start to go that you know that a great wind is coming soon, and you need to make special observances to effectively take that wind elsewhere. So you might find that their offerings are not what you expect, because most commonly offerings are something you think would attract that god's attention. You might be wanting to put down offerings to send that god away. So effectively you might be making offerings that are dead, a horrible dead thing that will put out a stench that will rise up on the wind, and the great deity will just bounce off in a different direction, trying to get away from this thing. So rather than doing the classic, I will lay down offerings to this god, they're possibly doing the opposite, attempting to push that god away so it will take its attention elsewhere. It's not so much that we're worshipping this great sky god, it's we're trying to keep that god away from us, because if they come, they will swirl through our tents, they will pick us up, they will send all the animals into panic, and everything will go wrong.
I love the idea that there's like a great altar stone on like a large hill in the middle of a great steppe where you're supposed to make offerings. And the idea is that if you have a year of plenty, you give enough offerings that it sates the wolf over a certain period of time, so that it's not ravenous and it doesn't come hunting for you. You're trying to keep them sated, trying to keep them asleep through like the winter, rather than them starving. Because when they starve, things get ugly. Donovan, really cool little note here. FYI, I'm gonna butcher this, but I'm gonna try. Sulky, Sulky Ij is Mongolian. Is Mongolian for mother wind, according to Google Translate. This is where we would be like, call the sensitivity writer.
Yeah, this is where you really want to have somebody who knows all of this stuff and then can say, see all this stuff you've created, you've missed out these core components of what life is like out there, and you should add this. What we're doing at the moment is just building a very loose skeleton, but this loose skeleton needs flesh, and we need skin, and we need detail, and we are not the best people to do that. Although we can create a really cool skeleton, you're better getting people who know it, who know these myths, and who have experienced those myths growing up, because they can then go, all this cool stuff can be added.
Yeah, I agree, Donna, man. This is something I would put in my notes and be like, would this be a good foundation for a name, or is there something else we should use? Because I agree.
It reminds me of my discussions with Sage concerning all the Nipponese stuff, where I'm like, I think this works. What do you think? And she's like, no. What you've done is, for example, in this case, you've not called it the mother wind. You've called it, for example, I don't know, the birthing wind. Or alternatively, or worse, the mother fart. And you don't realize that's what you've done because it's not your home language. This is one of the reasons that you need other people there who actually know it to bring it up, because you don't want to call it the mother fart.
I will say one of the other things this makes me think of thinking about how it would be interesting culturally is like, imagine when children are born, the idea of like the wind stealing the breath of children or babies, which is, you know, a common myth that existed for SIDS for a long time, of like, imagine the peoples at the steppes trying to make certain offerings and stuff to keep the wolves away from children, keep the wolves away from babies for fear of stealing their breath, which could have some fascinating things. Like, imagine like dogs and wolves are not allowed anywhere near where the babies are kept, or the babies are kept like in kind of like special hidden things, so they have things around them that are meant to ward off.
I would perhaps do it more for the birth. Because
the
that
birth
first
itself.
point, for the birth. So at that point, upon the birth, let's get the new life to breathe for the first time ever.
Oh yeah, that's
moving
fun.
past the umbilical cord, and possibly maybe because we have very much gone for one side of it, which is we're attempting to keep the gods away. Perhaps at the birth, that's the only time when they want one of the divine servants to arrive to hopefully bless that particular birth with a wind that chimes a particular note or something similar, but only one of them, because any of the others could bring death, could bring a curse. To be born under a north wind, for example, is to be born under curse, and it's not a good thing. Almost bringing in an almost astrological view, but with the different winds. So the birth sign that you were done, so the birth wind that you were born under when you took your first breath will forever color who you are out on the steppe. And there's maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 different divine winds, each of which has got its own color and tenor.
Yeah, and 4 different colors, maybe. White wolf of the north / winter, gray wolf the spring / east, black wolf the south / summer, and brown wolf the autumn. Yeah, something like that. I could also see like the wings being from different bird types depending on what aspects. So if you have like one of them's a death god, it has the great bearded vulture wings because it's the death god of the children. Whereas like one of them maybe has the wings of a bird that comes north in the summer or in the spring. So it has the spring bird wings and stuff like that.
I would also add that I would prefer to take it, if you're building this forward, past simply the 4 seasons, because that's a very real world position. We've got more that we can draw from because we're in the Warhammer world. We have 2 unique events that happens in the Warhammer world, which almost certainly would be associated with at least 2 of them, and that's the permanent year-by-year rise of Morsleib on 2 days, on special days when Morsleib is high in the sky during day and night, when we've got Hexenstag,
yeah,
the equivalent in the
that
Empire,
would be the
and
hunt of the Chaos Wolf.
Yeah, that's when the Chaos Wolf is hunting.
I would say there'd be
that's
more
already
than 4
a
children.
fifth. That's already a 5th, and I think that we probably want to have more. If you want to really dial down on the Warhammer, we would probably have 8 children, and each one of these 8 children has got a different way of manifesting, with the one to the north, 8 directions of chaos if you must, the one to the north being associated with Morsleib in a host of different ways. Perhaps some fur that emits green, a great a misty green horror around it as it bellows full and bellows at full pace. Ooh, it's horrible.
This would be another great time for like that sensitivity writer of how many seasons are there really up on the steppes. Like, are there 4 easily defined seasons? Are there more? Are there less? Because different cultures will have different numbers of seasons. But also,
what can we best reflect when we're doing that?
But like your war god, like I could imagine that with your groups of cavalry, you have like they have aspects of their armor or equipment that's meant to call upon the wolf, because you want the wolf running beside you, adding its speed to your own, or infantry that have emulate the wolf by having like certain kinds of horns that are, or they howl as they charge into battle, and things of that nature. Oh man, I'm digging this. BFG 40K says Northwind is the wind of change that mutates. Yeah, probably very likely.
The wind of change. Good Scorpion songs from the 90s.
Let's see. Donovan, given it's a hooved wolf, to quote the Walking with Beasts episode they are featured in, it's a sheep in wolf's clothing. Haha, there's a clever little joke that could be made there. That I could also see being a warning that's given. I feel like that would be a fun, but like almost like clumsily worded warning that someone from the steppes is giving to an outsider. That the wolf gods, they are good, but they are also like that wolf in sheep's clothing. I feel like would be something that a foreigner would accidentally extrapolate. Cody Smith, bellows instills the power of the wolves into metal. Yeah. So if you're trying to relate them to winds, the idea of trying to if there are those that are working with like fire or forges and stuff like that, being able to channel wind is a critical component of making fire in a reliable fashion, especially if you're trying to make fire that's hot enough to work metal in any way, shape, or form. You have to control the air going into the fire using bellows or like intricate construction stuff. One of the wolves would probably be deeply associated with that.
I'm basically reading up on Mongolian legends. There's tons of cool shit here.
I know.
Really tons. Everything from the legend of the blue unicorn et al. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. And exactly how souls and goblin souls and there's so much cool stuff here. We've started with a great idea, and I think with a big, strong, deep dive into Mongolian mythology, it could be embellished significantly.
I will say that I think we're getting to the point where as I get through the rest of these super chats, I think I'm kind of happy where we're at. Of like, this is the part where we would actually have to start doing research. Mm-hmm. We've got our basic idea, but now we would need to actually sit down, hopefully grab some people that actually are from these places and are well researched on the myths and history of these places, and start building something up. Which did you then reinforce Warhammer stories with, of like, how did the great original Gobla Khan, what was his interactions with the wolves? Because he would have had it as he tries to take over the steppes, and he united the great kingdom of
Are they enemies?
Yeah, are they enemies?
Yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah. Are they friends or allies? Yeah.
And the hobgoblins are known for their possibly aggressive stance against the winds. I'm trying to push them back with their various offerings, as we are sort of putting it, but actually they're pushing backings, so to speak. I quite like that.
Yeah, I would play around with how they've mentioned in Wolfrep 4th Ed about how incarnate elementals of light have been seen up on the eastern steppes, and they're known as appearing as like wind deities. So tying that in of that, there are divine servants of the wolf god, these winged wolf creatures that's one of the shapes that the incarnate elementals of light can take. Which would be a very cool version of that. And building like cultures beyond just the hobgoblins. What are the other tribes that live around there? Yeah. Some of them have fallen to chaos, but some of them haven't.
Absolutely.
How do they deal with the Great Bastion? What is the Great Bastion designed to try and stop the winds? And how do the people of the Eastern Steppes feel about it's like, would that insult the people of the Eastern Steppes? How would they feel bad about that culturally? Like when Cathay raised the wall, it cut off the southern wind, and they despise Cathay for doing that.
I quite like the idea that north of the Bastion, it's far, and it's as simple as it sounds, windier. And then you get past the Bastion, you hit the tranquil lands of Grand Cathay, where the divine wind has been stopped by the Great Wall. There's something in that I think that would work really quite nicely.
Captain Magma, could the wind god be somewhat of a conduit for the winds of magic since those are winds? Yeah, they would probably have.
That's why we'd have 8 divine children, each of which would probably be gently associated with one of the 8 winds as well. but gently, not heavily.
Yeah, just a little bit. Like it's like, oh, the god that brings the wind that feeds fires and feeds the bellows and stuff is your vaguely Axian one, but he's not a fire god.
Yeah, I think so.
He feeds the fire, so to speak. Captain Magma, I work at doggy daycare. There's a boomer man who refers to his dog as the white wolf, despite being the most unthreatening small white doodle ever. Literally a wolf in sheep's clothing.
I always liked the white wolf because as a term, it was pretty much coined by, you're going to hear it. You ready? Michael Moorcock, because Elric, one of the Eternal Champions, was the White Wolf, who was pretty much copied in so many respects over into the Witcher.
Everyone take a shot.
Yeah, absolutely, including I've finished my shots. Never mind. But White Wolf, the games company that did Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness, all the rest of it, is also named after Elric too. Elric White Wolf. So yeah, I got my mention.
Yep. Adam, could these winds have a loose association with... Yes. Yep. All right. Each would. So it would depend on how many wolves you go with. I agree with Andy that 8 would probably be the ideal number. And then you do subtle interactions with the winds as opposed to them. Or 9. Yeah, you could have 9.
You could have your 8 winds and your chaos one. The ill-favored child who has fallen. That'd be a fun way of doing it too.
And you could also have more or less than that. It just depends on how things wind up. You know, it could be that the people of the steppes, they only are aware of a couple of the winds for whatever reason. Yeah.
Or they may, much like Cathay, use the winds in different ways, or possibly, and the way they perceive it, there's maybe 10 winds or 12 winds, depending upon exactly
that would be the really fucking fun way to do it.
Yeah, I think that might be a bit more fun.
A good-sized wolf pack within the great mother at the top.
Yeah, that works quite nicely.
An interesting belief could be being settled. An interesting belief that settling down would be insulting to the wind wolf goddess, as the wind is always moving, and when it's not, you get stale air. That's cool.
I love that, and I particularly love the idea as well of that if you stop, it attracts them.
Yeah, the idea that
at its core, that's basically it. Yeah, and if you stop, it will come, and the wolves will come. So you're constantly on the move, following after herds that are also constantly on the move and rarely stopping at any one place for any time, because the wolves are constantly nipping away at the heels of the various large herds that are sweeping across the steppe and the various peoples that are following them or similar. So yeah, there's a lot there. I like that.
Yeah, that would be so good, because they also have that idea of like the chaos wolf is quite literally nipping at your heels, because the chaos tribes are always hunting. They're always, and if you stay still, they find you.
Indeed. And you get a very strong sense of the goddess's character and the god's character as well, where they are constantly on the move. They are movement. They are constantly hunting. They are constantly pushing not just themselves but everything else into motion across the steppe. In many respects, they are dynamic in a fashion that gives motion to the steppe that without them it wouldn't have. It would be more settled. It could be a very different location. And they have shaped the hobgoblins possibly into what they are today, this nomadic group of greenskins that are so unlike all the other greenskins. And they are, in some respects, responsible for it, as they have hounded and hunted these greenskins from place to place to place to place, turning those greenskins into something new, something that can cope with the constant pursuit, something that is always on the run and always ready to backstab to ensure that they can stay one step ahead. So we can already begin to speak to the actual nature of the hobgoblins by thinking about what happens when you're being pursued by this for your entire existence, and what it takes for someone like Hobgoblin Khan to stop and cross his great curved blades and say, I will take no more, and go to war with them. And that's kind of cool, because then we can get a Hobgoblin Khan myth where he stood against the wolves and went to war with them all by himself, and then cut down various wolves at one point. Perhaps one of them is dead. That makes for an interesting story as well, that Hobgoblin Khan managed to kill one of them, causing the rest of them to bellow off into the distance.
Either that or manages to capture and tame one of them.
There's lots of cool stories that we could have. And that perhaps then has our version of Hobgoblin Hobgoblin in this, riding a gigantic winged wolf entity.
Oh, that would be
with
so
horses.
fucking badass.
Okay, and that's because he has tamed one, he killed one, tamed one, whatever it was, allowing that to occur. So Hobgoblin is something special.
Yeah. I could see that being like, that's how you have to become a great Khan, is you have to tame the wolf that he tamed. That's always kind of following the hobgoblins around. Would be sick.
Yeah, something
Hagen,
in that.
A mother with divine children is an interesting parallel or rival to the Dragon Emperor and the Moon Empress. Yeah, there would definitely be a nasty relationship there, which would be
and
really
I think
fun
there's
to explore.
also potentially a story here as to who's dad.
Yep. Necromancer Cobalt, not to get too far ahead, but what would the priest look like? Does it have its own
I don't
wind of
think there
magic?
are any. This is one of the big mistakes of people who make Warhammer World stuff. They assume that there's worshippers of everything. The vast majority of the gods don't have priests. What they have is people trying to avoid the gods. That's it. Because the gods are awful.
Yeah, you would have your people that could use magic, your types of like shamans who might interpret it as a gift or a curse, depending on how their culture feels about it, from said gods. But they wouldn't. Yeah, it probably wouldn't be priests.
It would be more like this. Imagine you're a nomadic tribe that's making its way across the steppe. And one of the great winds steps up. One of two things occurs. Number one, the chieftain of the tribe, who has long led said tribe and has had various traditions passed on to them, would say, "Hey, tribe, we need to now do this to avoid this wind." And away they go and they do it. They have hosts of local myths and local tales about these winds and how we avoid them, we hide from them, we occasionally let them in to ensure that the divine breath is given to the people. But these aren't priests. These are the tribal chieftains. And that is the origin of what a priest was back in the day. The very first priests, for example, of the tribes of Sigmar were just the chieftains who would speak to the gods on behalf of all of their tribe. However, it eventually reaches the point when there's so many different gods that you can't know everything. You can't know all the stories. So older members of the community start picking up particular types of story. And these become what many regard as priests, but they're not really priests. They're shamans that know everything about particular parts. And priest kings, as it used to be, the old cliche of a priest king, as nicely popped out there. Yes, the old priest king. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
And these, perfect. And we'd have these older figures, these shamans, who would deal with not just a single god. They would deal with all of the gods and how the tribe can avoid them. So they would come forward, they'd do the correct rites, they'd make sure that things happened, but they're not priests of that god. What they are is the leader of dealing with the gods on behalf of their community. And sometimes, when there's a lot of gods involved, they split up and multiple people deal with different gods at different times because they're the experts in them. In time, some of those may become the equivalent of priests. They're the ones who completely understand what that god represents. They live and breathe that god. Only when it moves to proper extremism, when someone goes, you know what? I'm going to become like that god, do we get the equivalent of a true priest. And they are weirdos. They are the people who'll be working against their communities often, and they'll be the ones that go too far, who embrace the wolf and do something too far. I would argue that they are the equivalent of, to their society, chaos worshippers. People who go too far and embrace the wolf. They're not chaos worshippers. They are people who go too far on one side. But the average priest would be better described as a tribal elder who entreats the gods and understands all of their various ways. And they may, in turn, because magic is real in the Warhammer world, be the equivalent of wizards or priests as they're understood as far as rules are concerned.
They might have mutations. Like they might
Exactly.
have like wolf eyes.
The chances of them, so that they can best perceive when that particular wind is coming.
I do love that. Like the etheric sight to their culture would be known as wolf eyes because you're able to see the actual winds.
Totally. But when it all boils down to it, they're not priests of that god. If anything, they are spiritual leaders of their community who take in aspects of all of it.
Yeah,
which is a long way of saying priests don't necessarily always work as you expect in Warhammer.
Yeah, and there's a reason a lot of factions don't have priests. They're not default by any means. Hawkeye Lee, I love this, by the way. What if, as one of the wolf pups got trapped in Cathay by the building of the Great Bastion, the Mother Wind killed the Death Dragon and they were laid to rest in the river as a line that no side can now cross. That's cool.
That's a really cool little story that would work very well for this. Nice one, Hawk.
Like, that would do a great job. Like, that would be a awesome myth kicking around that would also do a great job of establishing, like, how fucking dangerous the mother wolf is.
Yeah, totally.
Of, like, she lost one of her children, who may or may not be dead, but is trapped somewhere in Cathay behind the wall, but she got her revenge, which may or may not have been the Emperor's plan all along, who could say? Let's see. I left off at... here. James, offerings to ward off the wolves should be live running animals with correct marker gifts loaded onto them so that the wolves chase them. Love that.
Yeah, like that.
That's a cool idea. Cool. That's a great offering.
So they're bellowing, they're bouncing along across the step with a host of things trailing.
So it's almost like the old idea of the scapegoat, where you totally load all the sin onto the creature and like go.
Yeah, I like that. That's got a lot of character to it, and you can see them trailing behind long streamers of prayer parchments and their equivalent of them, the prayer flags that are coming off them to attract the attention. And then you know it's worked when all you hear in the distance is and then as crunch it gets killed. Oh, that's horrible. Love it.
Yeah, I also love that because that would be a great way for like PCs to fuck up a really important ritual. Is by saving or killing one of these offerings before one of the wolves gets in the field, being like, "What have you done?"
Okay, then the wind starts whipping through the local encampment. Oh yeah, love it.
Yeah, and your PCs are fucking idiots, and it's great times. Ricky Chapman, the young wolf, golden fur brings youth, joy, and arrogance. The East Wing brings knowledge, skills of craft, and obsession. The West Wind brings war, and the hunt and blood, the North Wind brings chaos. Yeah, if you wanted to go with 4, you could play around with something similar.
I would attack the concept of crafts and obsession purely because that doesn't feel like it matches the rest of them. We're looking for wild entities, and creatures that live out in the wild are not creatures of crafting and obsession in that regard. Obsession could be twisted in various ways, but crafting in particular seems like it would be slightly inappropriate for the nature of these entities that are being built. The rest, though, yeah, all of them could easily work.
John Man, just a random fact to give a sense of scale, although we don't know how big it really was due to incomplete fossils. The school that Androsarchus is
holy crap!
That's a big beastie, which makes it perfect. So it's not a regular giant wolf. This is a monstrous cavalry-sized giant wolf.
Loving it.
Great. Cole Patterson, Dad? Clearly the shape-shifting Moon Empress is the father.
You know, as ridiculous and as obviously variously amusing that this is, something like that would not go awry, particularly given that gods and material gods at that, which the dragons effectively are in their own way, no matter how much they try to desperately deny it, they are still entities of myth. An entity of myth working like this would not surprise me at all. And possibly that would also speak to the Dragon Emperor's great hatred of the divine. Possibly his wife has at the past been at one with and often alongside the divine in a way that he's just not happy with. That would make for an interesting myth, true or not. I definitely think that could that
would also
work.
I would actually enjoy that a lot for showing the Moon Empress having like a unique development of when she first came down to the world. She was instead out in the wilds and was with this great wolf mother and
brought
on a
in
different
from
aspect.
The cold.
Yeah.
And
it
has left a bunch of half divine children out there are bounding their way across the open plain, both holding off chaos to the north, so in some respects acting like a second great wall in its own way, and simultaneously being responsible, because they're so wild, for the death of Cathayans and similar that make their way across past the bastion. Love it.
Gentos, I actually like that. Yeah, very Loki coded, but a reverse situation. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that works quite well.
Raising non-super chat comment, Hawkmaid, how would Ulrich interact / interface with the god, being gods of the Northish, and also the Teutonic people come from that area? So I think
possible dad.
Yeah, it could be very much possible dad.
Very much another possible dad there.
Or you could even have like kind of an amusing situation where the people of the Eastern Steppes are like, oh, that's simply one of her errant children that ran away from home.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways that this could be built. I think, though, that if you were doing this and if we were creating this for real for a book over in the Far East and the Mongolian steppe and all the rest of it, this would need to be properly addressed. Probably in a nice little box, probably with an in-character set of myths for different views and how they work, because Ulrich is real. Ulrich isn't something that's, made up by one people over here, and the people over here will thus not interact with it because they just made him up. Ulrich's real and has wandered the north all of his life. He has wandered the north over where the Dark Elves are, he's wandered the north over where the Hobgoblins are, and he is particularly known for one group of what used to be Chaos tribe members over in
I think
Middenheim. So
it would be fun
you would need to answer it.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun myth to play around with it. The idea of that Ulrich was, whether he was the father or one of the children or whatever, but the god that got in the steppe people's opinion too close to humanity. Like he, almost there's a relationship that he built with humanity, which would tell a story of how did the Tutikins get his attention.
Wolves howl at the moon. In fact, I'm
that's
more loving
so
it.
Good.
Yeah.
All right,
I was just reading down the comments from the top, and I was like, no, I love that. I think definitely that's dad.
Moon Empress is the dad?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm all in now.
I'm all in now, particularly because the wolves are pining after their mother who was stolen, their father who was taken away by the Cathayans, which gives us, I think, a lovely point of conflict. Conflict is a core... that's not a lovely detail. Conflict is a core component of all of the stories we build for Warhammer, because we need to know why one side's fighting the other side, because they're always fighting. And this gives us a real reason for why the Divine Wolves of the North are at war with the South, because they want to reclaim their father, who has been enslaved by the Dragon Emperor to the South as a birthing beast, something that they think is absolutely horrific, because they have fixed her as one thing rather than the amorphous creature that she should be. I would
love that so much, because man, the Cathayans would be pissed hearing
that. Yeah. Both sides would hate this, and in many respects you could even see how many would fall to chaos just to fight Cathay for what they had done to their divine father. That's beautiful.
Yeah, Captain Magma, we should do another stream like this in the future. We like to play around with these. Wednesday night streams are super fun. Because we can just...
Alexa, stop. Stinking Alexa. Alexa wanted to join in with us there.
What are the Irish priests called, says Hammond? Seamans.
I didn't get that. The internet isn't reachable.
Archon, we did that, Hawk. Thank you very much. Geralt of Rivia, Techless, Mal's Darkblade all walk into a bar. The bartender says, "Welcome to the Inspired by Elric convention." Yeah,
you're not wrong. Techless in particular, who is just Elric.
Necromancer Kobold, what would the Mother Wolf think of the Church? I imagine she'd hate them.
Definitely.
They represent the worst of a lot of things.
And the nomadic people of the steppe, who in many respects are her children in a sort of loose way, which means the hobgoblins that are enslaved are also going to be her enemies, and also her lost children, depending upon how it manifests. I quite like it.
Hammond, so this is why Gerald keeps saying winds howling. Yes, it also just sounds like a cool phrase, like winter is coming. Ricky Chapman, Ulrich and the wolf holding boom boxes outside the Great Bastion. Oh, for mom. Come back. Donovan, so Ulrich is the potential son of the Moon Empress. If you were to go with that, that would be an interesting interaction between Cathayans and Ulrich. And if you go back and check our Minheim / Cathay streams, that the Moon Empress is about silver flames, and who also has a silver flame.
There is a definite connection between Ulricanism and the Moon Empress. And there's a definite connection between Ulrich and the Moon Empress. This is one way that we could look at that connection. I personally don't think Ulrich would be the son of the Moon Empress. Probably. But that doesn't mean he wouldn't be either. It's a story that could easily be built. Ulrich, though, is definitely an entity that walks the material realm, unlike others. And if you were taking that route, you could argue that Ulrich isn't strictly speaking a god, which would be an interesting way of making it happen.
Man, it would be so spicy for it to be like, Ulrich's, because he took the form of a man and led the Tutikins and mates with humans and stuff. Oh, he's actually the son of one of the divine wolves and a man or a woman. Would be a very bizarre twist that would be kind of crazy. And also would make him and Sigmar's relationship very interesting in a lot of fun ways. Hammond, let Andy read my last chat. You're American. Fine.
So this is why Geralt says Winds howling. Not sure what you're looking for there.
There you go. It was so much better. All right, and that
I'm really not sure what was going on there. I feel like I missed something, Hammond.
that is we're all cut
Awesome.
up. This was great. I am so pleased with where we ended up.
So I wasn't sure how this stream was going to go. We discussed it and we were like, this will be fun. And I was like, yeah, this will be fun. And I was thinking about where it could end up going and how we could make it interactive. And this has landed so far beyond where I expected when we first pitched it, and has also created something which I think is so much more interesting than I also expected. This isn't something I would have built, but simultaneously, if I was put in a corner up there in the far east north part of the Warhammer world and was asked to create something, this could have been an outcome, or at least something similar. But I probably wouldn't have built this. You have all absolutely rocked in building something that I feel not only has loads of character, bags of character, but with a bit of tweaking and maneuvering is beginning to feel really Warhammer. And also, not only does it feel Warhammer, but it feels like it fits with the existing myths that we already have, not only from that part of the world, but from other parts of the world as well, where we are dealing with our, let's say, Ulrican-styled wolf stroke ice stroke moon aspects, all of which I think have created an unique and interesting entity that you should all be very proud of. This is kind of rocked.
Yeah,
Where did
this is
that
one
one come up from again?
Sorry, he wanted you to read this one.
Siemens.
Apparently, it's like a Seamus joke.
Siemens. Well, an Irish priest called Siemens. I feel like I'm missing something.
I feel like you need maybe an Irish accent to get what you're hoping for
An
from
Irish
that.
priest called Siemens. No, I'm still not getting it. I feel like I'm missing something here. I'm so sorry, Hammond.
Whatever, guys.
Is it like Seamus? No. Siemens? Oh,
it's a shaman called. Oh, it's a shaman called Seamus. God, y'all are.
I can't believe I missed that. Oh, thanks,
guys.
Thanks.
We're 3 hours and 40 minutes in. Give us a break. Ricky Chapman, the Moon Empress has a little black book with a bunch of gods in it. Could very well be. I mean, hey, when you're dealing with shapeshifters are fun. Because they could do wild shit.
Yeah, and I think the Moon Empress is something that should be more widely used across the world.
Yeah, because she's the moon god. Like, she's Manslib.
She's come from Manslib. And that is not something that is wholly Cathayan. So I would like to see her myth spread about elsewhere.
Yeah, and to reinforce what Andy said, I really did not feel like we were going to be able to land anywhere firm. I sat a lot of today thinking, how the hell are we going to do enough polls to get anywhere at all remotely interesting?
Yeah. and we did.
Y'all did a fantastic job. And the big thing is, I want to give y'all a lot of credit of that. A lot of the suggestions in chat were fantastic. We were pulling a lot of great things. I feel like me and Andy didn't actually have to work that hard. Which was very nice. Like the whole thing of like picking out the Antrosochorus and the people talking about like the wolves howling at the moon and the wind, all this stuff. Y'all did fantastic. Y'all did phenomenal. This is up there for me with like the Creator Everchosen or the Great Tarmogon's Brother streams. Like this is up there. We haven't
done Creator Everchosen yet.
Not yet. One day. Not yet. Donna Man, the collective random knowledge of chat combined with the Warhammer knowledge of Sotek Andy always makes interesting outcomes. Speaks to the power of group projects. Yeah. I am genuinely pleased, and if there are any artists in chat that want to do artistic rendition of these creatures, please do and let us
go wild. Yeah, and also if you want to take it further and possibly even do a write-up of it, I don't know, create your own version of a quick write-up of one of the Warhammer gods for this collection of entities we built, go wild. If you want to hike all the way back to the original 1990s books and then build them using those rules, again, go wild, because all of the tools are out there for you to create stats for these things, for you to build in-game versions for how these gods could be worshipped. And particularly on the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay side, it's just sitting there pregnant like a mother wolf, waiting to give birth to all of these super cool things that you've very much helped build.
Yeah, and we will have threads open. I'll have one open on my Discord. I assume Andy will put one on his as well in the Lorebeards section. So if you want to talk further about this god and try and come up with like names or art or any of that stuff, or do more stuff, then feel free. I will be popping in there to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, me too. I'll pop up a thread right now.
Listener Chris, didn't Old World Kislev reach the steps? Would be interesting to see their perspective. Yeah, you would definitely have Kislev's relationship with it. And I mean, considering the Gospodars also come from up there, and the Ungol Empire seems to have stretched vaguely in that direction. Yeah, you would definitely have interactions. I mean, think about the idea of like the Tempest, you know, those great winter storms, and that there would be people that come from the Eastern Steppes who would view things like that, view blizzards in a very different context than a Kislevite would, which would be super duper fun. Plus, Urson actually is rather amusingly, heavily reinforced as a god that's surprisingly sympathetic to the other animalistic gods like Tal and Ulrich. Urson tends to have a fairly positive relationship / rivalry with them. So there could be something between Urson and the wolf goddess as well. But anyway, that is it for us.
Thread is opened. If anyone wants to go and chat over on the LAWhammer Discord, we have built one already.
Awesome.
I would like to end with one other very important point. Beyond, obviously, you should go buy Dark Deeds, and if you haven't done so already, I now cry. And that is, happy birthday, Sotek.
Thank you. This was a fantastic birthday gift. This was a blast. I actually really enjoyed this. All right, so last couple quick things. LAWhammer Friday, 2 days from now.
Absolutely. It's a big one this Friday. It's the episode's called Dead Ringers, and this is one I've been waiting 5 years to do.
I'm very excited.
I originally pitched the idea to this to the effective creator of Warhammer's roleplay site, Graham Davis, 5 years ago, and he was like, because we were going to be resolving something that had not really been resolved in Warhammer, at least from the perspective of the roleplay, and I'm really hoping it lands this Friday.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Also, they ended on a hell of a cliffhanger last week. Yes, it's also Valentine's Day, which is your warning and heads up for anyone that still needs to get stuff. If it's, I don't remember if Valentine's Day is global or not, but if it is Valentine's Day, at least in the US.
Oh yeah, it is Valentine's Day, totally is, and yes, it's quite global, not completely, but quite.
Yeah, Lindsay's getting the best Valentine's Day gift of all, a LAWhammer session.
Yeah, totally. I mean, how could that not be the best gift ever?
I also will be doing a stupid stream on Friday before LAWhammer. I'm going to come on before LAWhammer, and I'm going to do a dumbass tier list stream about Warhammer characters, romantic wise, and then we'll raid into Andy's thing, which will be fun. It's going to be really dumb, but in a good way.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, Rookery on Saturday.
On the this Saturday we're going to be discussing role-playing in the real world, because somebody has just done a big Kickstarter. Her name I can't remember. So yeah, they've just done a Kickstarter for playing a mom in a role-playing game, and she's just done a super cool role-playing game of that. And we're going to be discussing role-playing in a non-fantasy environment and exactly how that can bring advantages you might not expect this Saturday at 7 p.m. I, however, don't have the details to that to hand. I'll be posting about them tomorrow, though, for anyone who watches over on the Rookery side.
We have several people in chat asking, would this be a good place to start LAWhammer? I would say no. I would say I really would recommend starting from the beginning. Though, I don't know, maybe Andy and the crew at some point could do like kind of a catch-up episode.
Yeah, we're going to be doing, we've already got one planned, which is a catch-up for if you don't want to watch through one section and the next section, you can just read a thing and get yourself a pretty good idea, or watch the video, because Ed is currently in the process of building one where it'll just be a quick summary of, you know, the first set of the adventure, the next set. So you could watch later, but it's yeah, the one we're doing this Friday, possibly not the best place to jump in. You don't want to roll up on like a place.
Yeah, it's a proper crazy place. Yeah, because you're gonna be going, I don't understand what the fuck's going on, and yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, it would be quite the story.
Would that be the catch ya up episode? That's, y'all are terrible. All right, and then last thing is this Sunday on Lorebeards, we're going to be doing Alariel and the Everqueens.
Oh, yeah.
Which is going to be super fucking cool, just in time for Valentine's, because, of course, the Heart of Avalorn. And there is a lot to say about Everqueens. You're gonna see a little bit of nerd rage, a little bit of there's gonna be a lot of really good. It's gonna have a lot of good highlights and stuff, and that'll be on the LAWhammer channel. And
Is it? There we go. I knew that.
Yes, and the
You sure?
90. Wait, what did we
I
do
think
this
that might
past
be
Sunday?
on yours this week. I think maybe. I'm not sure anymore.
Oh, you're right. You're right. No, you're right. Yeah, sorry. We did LAWhammer this past Sunday. Jesus
Yes,
Christ.
we did.
Um,
It's my one will be the week after, so that's going to be on this channel, wherever you're watching, over on this Sunday, and whatever we do the week after that will be over on LAWhammer. Next Wednesday, whatever the heck we do, will be on the LAWhammer channel.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Yay!
All right. Anyway, thank you all for watching. We're gonna get out of here. We'll see you guys soon for more info and yada yada yada. Bye bye.
See you all later. Bye bye.